Jackal Among Snakes. Author, Nemorosus. Chapter 31, Machine Learning. If one was suddenly placed in a situation where they needed to dispatch near 100 animated corpses coated in metal and capable of bending steel with their hands, they might not be able to come up with a solution. That was doubly true if they were entirely out of magic when confronting this situation. Argrave had faced worse odds. Granted, it had been within a game, and there was no imminent death in the case of failure. One of the main reasons people were able to do much more in games than in real life was because of the limitations imposed by artificial intelligence. NPCs could not act like truly real people. They were incapable of making judgments and responding to the situation accordingly. They had to be programmed, and that programming could only account for so many scenarios. Once one learns vaguely how the AI functions, it becomes easy to overcome insurmountable odds. You can manipulate the AI into poor situations. These Tomb Guardians could be compared to artificial intelligence. Though Argrave had thought while planning this might be a big hurdle, all he needed was time. Argrave peered through a small hole in the palisades out at the crowd of Tomb Guardians. Though they had been headed straight for Barden, they now veered away, following after a lone figure, Guilliman. He rode on horseback, circling around them and deflecting the odd magic arrow that came near him. "We just need to wait," Argrave said, leaning against the palisade as he stared out. "If we move too soon, the archers will take notice of us and fire. Those things are indiscriminate butchers." "You're placing Guilliman in much danger," Annalise commented. Argrave turned his head round. He was surrounded by Vadaimon. It felt strange being around them. With them, he felt as though he was average height again. With the pale skin, there might as well be kin. "He's tough, and he's the only one I can trust with this. Besides, worst-case scenario, vampires can regenerate, and are much more physically capable than most. You should know this." Annalise nodded. "It is merely disquieting. He is a great figure." Yet the Vadaimon excelled him. Argrave stepped away from the palisade. "He is still respected, even if Vade has punished him." "I study his strategies." "It shows," Argrave said. "Without your quick decision, things would have gone much differently." "I did not do enough." Annalise crossed her arms. "The battle should not have been so close." "What would you have done differently?" Argrave asked, curious to hear some insights from a future prominent strategist. Annalise did not take long to consider. "I would have tried to kill you as quickly as possible. Your magic sealed the first landing party's fate. I did not think the commander would be willing to sally out of the palisades and onto the beaches. Things would have been much easier if you had remained within the walls." Argrave smiled. He walked away and sat on a wooden crate that looked stable. "I left an impression." "I see. You were a good commander." "Most believe Guilliman was behind the attack on our druid scouts." "I see now that may be otherwise." Annalise stood before the sitting Argrave, keeping her eye on the distant mob. "I am surprised you are not with the humans." Annalise looked at the crowd of knights, who were ensuring the safety of the citizens. They were very leery of the snow elves, not that Argrave could blame them. Exactly. Unlike the Vadaimon, the humans were not used to setting aside conflicts to cooperate in the face of a greater threat. Argrave's smile turned bitter. "I wasn't the commander, merely an advisor. That incompetent moron nearly killed us all by allowing us to deal with the first landing party alone. If there had been more time to prepare." "You sit with a strange posture." "You're hurt," Annalise said suddenly. "You're back." "Turn around." "What?" "Why?" She stepped forward. "You should be healed." Argrave waved her away incredulously. "Save your magic. It will be needed." "I will do as I please." She took another step closer. "Our contract does not dictate what I do with my magic." Argrave frowned, overwhelmed by her intensity. He slowly did as she asked. Annalise held her hand out, and he felt an odd sensation like razor burn along his backside. The pain from the cut faded. "Thank you." Argrave moved his back around, getting used to the feeling. "I'll remember that you spent your magic to relieve me of some minor pain when we die terribly due to a lack of spells." "Why? Have no confidence in your plan?" she rebuked. Argrave laughed. "No. It should work just fine. Not much magic will be needed, actually." Argrave looked back out at the slowly fading mob. "Want to know what those things are?" Annalise nodded. "They're corpses, coated in metal." "It's steel, I think, but that's not important." "They're reanimated by magic." "Bludgeon them, sever limbs, stab them, crush them." "Those things don't work, really." "Not only is it very hard to pierce the metal, losing parts doesn't matter to them. They'll crawl after you if you've severed all their limbs. The key is targeting the magic that's reanimating them." Argrave leaned back, placing his back against a house. "Magic is about the most painful thing for them, but Ebonice does the job nicely. Pierce their skin with Ebonice, it'll be like a balloon popping, the things fall over like a house of cards, and we're crawling away from Tartarus back to Cloud 9. The things are devilishly strong. Despite their slowness, all we need to do is restrict their mobility." "That's why we needed time." Argrave pointed at Annalise. "To set up those restrictions." Annalise waved her hands, going along with Argrave's thought process. "Precisely." Argrave snapped his fingers, but the gloves he wore made no noise come out. "Shouldn't be too much longer. Guilliman will give us all the time we need. He's reliable like that." "There's something I don't understand." "How can I enlighten you?" Argrave spread his arms wide. "Why bother killing them?" She paused, and Argrave furrowed his brows in confusion. She elaborated further. You could have Guilliman lure them away to one of the other Vadiman landing parties, have them descend on an unwitting group. You could simply leave them somewhere far out in the wilderness. So why? It's common sense to clean up after yourself when you make a mess, Argrave said, then shook his head with a light laugh. He looked back to the horde of metal monsters, now fading in the distance. Those things, if left unattended, will cause a lot of problems for a lot of people. The cat is out of the bag, and now it's time to skin it. I don't want anyone to die, really, neither Vadiman nor human. Gerektik Kiet is what's important. And so, I'll take care of those frozen freaks. You have no loyalty to your people, humans? Argrave turned his head to the side. Never really thought of it. As far as I'm concerned, a human is just what I happen to be. We're all animals, despite how some would raise themselves above that label. All that matters is character. Guilliman is of good character, as are you, as are many others, regardless of vague separations. Unfortunately, greed and stigma cause differences to escalate into conflict. Annalise lowered her head, thinking. She asked a question. Do you think you are of good character? Argrave opened his mouth, but he found that he had no answer. Guilliman rode the horse steadily, so as not to exhaust it. The beast was admirable, keeping such composure near a massive mob of enemies. The two guardians followed him closely behind. Guilliman needed to keep a constant eye on them. The archers, of which he counted around 15, constantly fired on his position. Generally, the movement of the horse was enough to keep him from being hit. At times, he would need to swat aside the magic arrows that came too near. The archers, every time they fire, are actually killing themselves. The magic they conjure has to come from somewhere, and they take it from the source that keeps them alive. I need you to ride until you stop receiving fire. If you keep a close eye, you might be able to see them keel over. Guilliman might have been skeptical of Argrave's directions in the past, but now that he had escaped the tomb as easily as he did not doubt them in the slightest. The boy was talented, even if he had knowledge vested in him by Earl Abner. Formulating plans based on that knowledge was not an easy matter. 2 arrows soared towards Guilliman. His senses came alert instantly, and he tried to swat both out of the air. The first was handily dispersed, but the second hit at the feet of the horse. A cloud of dirt exploded into the air, startling the horse. It reared, rushing forward. Another projectile came, and the horse's movements made him barely miss it. It struck Guilliman in the gut, and pain consumed him. He looked down at the wound. The arrow had torn through near half of his torso. He grunted in pain, letting the horse take him away from the mob. He grabbed at his flasks, but he could smell that they were empty. He hadn't prepared enough. Damn, he cursed. The wound was starting to close, but it was so severe that it roused his vampiric instincts. He felt his rationality slipping away, undermined by a fell beast that desired him to be a slave to his cravings. He grabbed his neck and squeezed tightly, so tightly that no air could escape. Have to hold on long enough to get the job done. Then, plenty of corpses on the beaches. The thought set the beast within stirring once more. No, don't think of blood. Think of the task. Do your duty. With no uncursed blood coursing through him, the sun burned Guilliman's newly healed flesh. He kept his eyes on the mob. 3 arrows rushed towards him, and he swatted them away with a wild ferocity he lacked previously. His movements were free of the military efficiency he generally possessed, replaced by that of an animal's instinctual movements. This seems vaguely ridiculous, Annalise commented. She held her hands out, and a great mound of earth rose up, forming a wall. Argrave stood behind Annalise, directing her earth magic. How so? Already, there was a formidable earth maze with 5 entrances that converged into one walkway, wide enough for one to pass. These creatures will just allow themselves to walk into this maze, be herded into one point. Argrave looked at the now distant horde of tomb guardians. Calling them creatures makes it seem like they're alive. They're animated by magic, and they respond to living things' magic. They track things by sensing it. There's limits to that, though. They can sense magic through walls, but if it were just that, they would swing at walls. They only attack when they are certain no impediment stands between them and their target. As such, lurking at the end of a narrow entryway and herding them into it is the best choice for dispatching them. What's to say they won't walk around, climb over, or any other number of things? Argrave moved down, walking to the open gate of Barden. We won't be killing them at the maze. We'll be killing them at the gate to Barden. This maze is just designed to thin the rate at which they get to it, so that they don't climb over the palisades. As long as walking is less time-consuming, the tomb guardians will never climb over things. In truth, the directions Argrave had given Guilliman to guide him through the tomb was a common method to herd all the guardians into the narrow entryway of the mine shaft. This way, the player could dispatch them one by one as they emerged, reaping experience en masse. This plan at the gate of Barden was merely a modified version of that. Once they come sauntering to the gate, we have 2 Vadimen standing by like butchers in a slaughterhouse, chopping at whatever walks through with an ebonice weapon. Argrave emulated the motion. We should probably dig a little ditch so that the bodies don't stack up large enough to stop them from coming. Commander Annalise, the Vadimen on scout duty called out. The human's companion is returning. The fire from the archers appears to have ceased. Argrave smiled. Well, we'd best hurry, hadn't we? A brawl is surely brewing. Chapter 32. Blood drive. Gulliman rode his horse onwards, leaning on its head. He felt the exposed flesh on his torso burn, and now that the archers had perished and deprived him of distraction, he could feel the pain of the sunlight. He tried to focus on the pain to drive away the bestial curse of vampirism swirling through his blood. He kept his eyes fixed on the wooden palisades ahead. It was not much longer before his task would be finished. When he came near, he jumped from the horse. It neighed in pain, and the sheer force toppled the creature to the ground. Gulliman cleared the wooden stakes easily, crashing amidst some jars full of water. He heard screams from the houses beside him. They sounded loud, so sharp were his senses. He crawled away from the sunlight like a deranged spider, retreating further into the shadows. He could smell blood all around him. The smell of the ocean wind carried it. He could smell it seeping into the wooden planks at the docks, could smell it in the earth, the grass. He kept his hand on his neck, squeezing tightly. The world seemed tinted red. Gulliman kept to the shadows, waiting until the beast realized it was caged, that he owned it, not the other way around. He heard rushed footfalls heading towards him, and with it, a scent of blood. He heard the heartbeat, frantic, fast, driven by fear and excitement. Gulliman, a voice called out. Hot damn! I knew you could do it. It's calling for me. Gulliman noticed. The heartbeat is calling for me. Listen, I know that you just finished with that one thing, but I don't have time to mince words. Where are you? Damned dark back here. Could you come out? It wants me to come out. It's not afraid of what might happen. Gulliman lunged forward towards the welcoming voice, throwing his helmet aside. He grasped the prey and fell on it. His sharp teeth sunk into something hot, and he drank. It tasted sweet, like a cup of water after traversing a desert, or a piece of meat after a long hunt. This was the best feeling, Gulliman supposed. His prey struggled with weak, vain hits at his side, pushing and struggling. Gulliman did not care. He held on tightly, enjoying the blood. This seemed especially pure and powerful, a mage's blood, he could tell. It had a faint tinge to it, magic in the blood. Think. The voice whispered, struggling against Gulliman. Think of what? Gulliman pondered. Would your family want this? Gulliman's mind spun, and his world of red shattered. He looked down and saw his brother, battered and broken, bleeding from the neck. The image slowly faded, and Argrave's face replaced his brother's. Gulliman tossed Argrave away and leapt back, in panic. He slammed his back against the house's wall. Argrave crawled away, holding his still bleeding neck. By Vade. Aye. Gulliman gingerly reached forward. Argrave stared at him with hollow grey eyes. Hash. Argrave watched Gulliman. The unshakable elf was, for the first time Argrave had ever seen, panicking. He tried to think of something witty to say, but his neck stung, and his brain felt like it had a heavy fog over it. Lethargy threatened to consume him. His breathing was too fast, and he felt dreadfully weak. He blinked and bit his lips, knowing that sleeping here might mean his death. Gulliman rushed forward, reaching into Argrave's satchel. He pulled free a stamina potion, and then held it to Argrave's lips with trembling fingers. Argrave caught it with his teeth and tilted his head back. It did not make the pain diminish, nor stop the bleeding, but it did allow him to regain his focus. Argrave used the last of his magic to cast healing magic, sealing the wound. Gulliman collapsed backwards, staring at Argrave with an all-too-complicated expression. Panic, fear, guilt, anger. It was a veritable salad of regret. Phew, Argrave sighed with a hoarse voice. I knew you were dissatisfied, but you proved your point. It was not my intent to. The beast. It battered, twisted. I know, said Argrave. I know. Gulliman sat there, mouth agape. Those fangs of his looked very ominous now that they had bitten a piece of him off. You run one hell of a blood drive. I hope I'm the right blood type for the donor. Argrave tried to stand, but he collapsed amidst a shattered pot. His muscles were cramped. Gulliman stood, trying to help Argrave but hesitant to approach. It was very evident he was afraid of hurting him. Damn it. Can't stand, Argrave complained. He took a deep breath, and then looked around. Came here to tell you you're needed. Take your ebony axe, head to the gate. Annalise can probably position you. Go. Gulliman frowned. But you need help. I'll live. Just a little. Drained, that's all. Argrave let out a low, dry laugh. But seriously. Go. The Tomb Guardians will kill us all if you don't. Annalise will explain things. Look for the beautiful woman with long white hair. Wait. You met her already. Can't think straight. Argrave. I'm sorry. I never. My wound just. The curse. Gulliman stammered. I knew the risks when I hired you. Stop talking. Move your feet. Make use of the blood I so graciously donated. You could probably use it better than me right now, anyway. Argrave laid his head against the wall. After watching for a time, Gulliman picked up his ebony axe from where he'd dropped it, and then ran to the gate as Argrave instructed. Argrave laid there, biting his lips to ensure he didn't fall asleep. It's like those people that try to take wild animals as pets. Tigers are cool enough, sure, but eventually, they'll remind you that they're wild animals, just like vampires are killers. Argrave bent his knees, then placed his feet against the ground, anchoring them. He put his hand to the wall, slowly rising to his feet. Argrave managed to come to his feet with a grunt. His legs felt as weak as clouds, as though they could fail at any minute and send him crashing back to the ground. If I hadn't been able to remember that Gilliman's family was the only thing keeping him anchored to life, I doubt I would have been able to draw him from that state. With one shaky step after the other, Argrave walked forward, arm held against the side of the wall for support. His breaths were quick and rapid, and he could feel his heart struggling. He passed the corner of the house and fell against a barrel, holding himself up shakily. Ahead, the Tomb Guardians were walking through the gate. Gilliman and a few other snow elves were making short work of them. One of them is doing it wrong. He's in line of sight. He's going to die. Argrave tried to push away from the barrel and go to them, but the barrel moved and he stumbled, collapsing onto the grass. Things went dark. Night Trials watched the Snow Elves butcher those men made of metal. The Snow Elf commander refused to allow them to participate, citing that they were not as strong as Vadaimon. Riles assumed Vadaimon was what those abominable elves called themselves. He turned his head to look at a horse. The wizard Argrave had ridden it into here, assumed the position of an advisor abruptly using the mark of Montesi, and then enacted this cooperation with the Snow Elves. The man had been willing to risk life and limb, so Riles did not question that he came from the Duke's orders. Now that things had proceeded the way they had. Knight Simon, Riles said quietly, staring at the horse. Yes, Commander Riles. Riles strode towards the horse. Take command. I am going to return to Mateth. What, sir? Why? I must tell the Duke what has transpired here. Something is off. Though the battle has been postponed, the wizard has other motives. Riles clambered atop the horse, and then spurred it towards the gate opposite where they were doing battle with the metal creatures. He rode away, passing by the dead bodies left by the recently transpired battle. But he is so close with the elves. Perhaps it is not a coincidence. It is my duty to take this matter to the Duke, as much as I would wish to stay with my men. Argrave, wake up. A voice called. Argrave blinked open his eyes. He was standing. You have to get ready for school, someone chided him. But I don't go to school, Argrave answered. I'm a fantasy man now. Stop acting like a child, the voice chided again. It was vaguely familiar, female, young. Argrave was in the school courtyard. He had to go to gym class. He ran around, the environment shifting around him. Everyone was staring at him. He realized he was nude. He opened the door to the gymnasium. It was wide, as colossal as a stadium. The bleachers were made of stone. Argrave remembered he had to get something from the supplely closet. He opened the door to the supplely closet and entered. Someone was sitting by the hearthplace where a fire raged. Argrave walked closer to them. They turned their head. Their eyes had melted away, and their skin was cracked and burned. Want a cigarette? The person held out a cigarette. No. I only smoked when I was a teenager, said Argrave. My friend was looking for you. No, I was looking for him, the person said. He reached into a bag of popcorn, pulling out a fistful of tiny people. He tossed them into the fire. Their crackling cries were like music in rain. It was a song. This must be the place by Talking Heads. You killed me, the man said. He turned back to Argrave. I had to, Argrave said. It hurt. I bet. I can see it on your face. I'm going to throw these people in the fire, the man said. The world shifted. Argrave was sitting above the fire, dangling from a chair hung by a chain. He held a bunch of people in his hands. There were so many, they were slipping out of his hands. You can stop this, said the burned man. He was watching from the side. I'm trying. There's too many, Argrave said, panicking. There's only one way to really stop this. How's that? Want a cigarette? The man held out a very large cigarette. Just tell me how. The burned man shrugged. Just jump in. Either way, you'll smoke. Argrave looked down at the fire. He heard David Byrne's voice from the flames. It repeated, I guess I must be having fun, over and over again. It's you or them. The burned man said. I don't like getting hurt. I don't want to. Either way, you'll smoke. The burned man turned around and walked away. Argrave stood on the chair. It swung in the air. He took a diver's stance and jumped into the fire. Chapter 33, Stowaway Jackal. Argrave sat up, breath rapid and face drenched in sweat. His body was rocking. He looked around, seeing an unending tide of blue. Feeling a rising blackness in his stomach, he turned over, grabbing the side of something wooden and vomiting into the water. The putrid substance slowly faded away, falling into the ocean and drifting behind them. He took a second to catch his breath, clearing his nose and spitting out what little remained of the vomit. His whole body was aflame with pain. As his senses came to, he heard a rhythmic chant, and saw oars moving back and forth, cutting through the water. He turned his head, finally making sense of his surroundings. His body rocked back and forth with the tides. He was on a longship, though he looked around, trying to spot the coast. They were far out into sea. He turned his gaze back to the ship. The Vadaimon rowing the boat looked at him and spoke of him, muttering about the hand reaching from the abyss. It seems the lie of him being an agent of Erlebnir had spread. Annalise sat adjacent from him, staring with a book in her free hand. Her amber eyes were passive. We're taking you to Vaiden, as was agreed. Fortunately, though you burned one ship and I crashed the other, one was left in sailing condition, Annalise said in greeting. You passed out. You should eat food. Drink fluids. Argrave touched his head. A fierce headache disturbed his thoughts. The memories of the battle soon replaced those uncomfortable images born of his dreams, and he looked around for Gilliman. Where? How is Gilliman? Argrave asked. He dispatched those metal things admirably. His actions spared us much carnage. After, he said he would wait for your return to right his wrongs. His life would be forfeit in Vaiden as an exile and a vampire. Argrave nodded. He felt very shaken. He had mustered a courage he did not know he had during the battle. But whatever was propping up his mentality now was gone. War was cruel. It was a great song to all the misery in the world. Annalise walked to him, thrusting a piece of bread and a canteen of water in his face. Here, she said. Argrave looked up at her. He took the items. I forgot. You have a big heart. He chewed on the bread slowly, taking small sips of water. Content that he was eating. Annalise walked away. With his free hand, Argrave cleaned the dirt off his body, conjuring his barely replenished magic to remove blood, mud, and other such filth. It felt like he was shedding his sins, somewhat. After he had finished the bread, Annalise handed him other things, mostly vegetables, but it was food. It had probably been taken from Baden in haste as they left. There were a lot fewer on the boat than he recalled being at Baden, and the thought that some deaths could have been avoided had he remained conscious disquieted him. Argrave ate his food slowly, working on suppressing his meandering thoughts and emotions. Annalise read quietly despite the rocking of the ship. One hand tended to her long white hair, twisting it about in her fingers. She was braiding a section of it with one hand alone, fingers moving skillfully. She had already done near a foot, and considering it went down to her knees when she was standing, it would be a long process. She stopped. Argrave looked up at her face to see she'd taken notice of him watching. What? Got stage fright? Argrave asked, sitting a little straighter. Keep going. It was entertaining. She unwound the braid, and her hand dropped down to her knee. Gilliman bit you, she said matter-of-factly. He was hurt. It was necessary. Argrave responded after a brief pause. You are not worried about contracting vampirism? She tilted her head. He would need to drain me completely, and then I'd need to drink his blood, or ingest it some more other way. Yug. Argrave shuddered thinking of it. Contrary to popular belief, it isn't like a disease. It's more so a ritual. It's hard to be turned by accident. That's why Gilliman's case is curious. You don't hate him, despite what happened? Her amber eyes stayed locked on his face. Hate him? Argrave repeated. It was a donation. That's a lie. He was much too shaken, much too guilty, for that. Your body was bruised from being grabbed. You also fell unconscious. Argrave furrowed his brows, but a smile came to his face. You keep seeing through me. I'm going to start losing confidence in my grifting abilities. They've carried me a long way. Argrave sat up a little straighter as his feelings of weakness faded somewhat. His arms felt like pudding and his head still throbbed fiercely. Fine, so it wasn't exactly philanthropy for the thirsty, I'll admit that much. But... Argrave pointed at Annalise to emphasize his words. I don't hate him. Hate, at least in terms of hating people, stems from a lack of understanding, an inability to view the other person's perspective. Ultimately, hating another merely weighs on yourself. It's a waste of brain power, though. Being pragmatic and being naive are separate things entirely. Some people will always hate you, and it's best to learn to accept and adapt to that. Argrave lowered his finger. Recognizing that and following it are entirely different matters, though. Everyone inevitably succumbs to their emotions now and again. Annalise lowered her head, mulling over his words in silence. The waves of the ocean battered against the longship, and Argrave turned his head out to look out across the ocean. He considered falling in for a moment and his mind wandered. The ocean was a terrifying thing looking at it from above, but once inside, it offered an unparalleled freedom. Swimming in all directions, up, down, left, right, it must be mundane for a fish, but for a landlubber as he was, it sounded enticing. Amphibians got the best of both worlds. I think you're right. Argrave turned his head back to Annalise. She was smiling faintly. It was the first time Argrave had seen her smile, and he could not help but return it. They stared at each other for a long moment, but Argrave eventually turned away, blinking quickly. How do you intend to persuade the patriarch? Annalise inquired, shutting her book and devoting her attention to conversation. With words, obviously, Argrave said drolly. Well, let's see. You'll probably introduce me as the agent of Erlebnia and the killer of those druid scouts in order to get an audience with Druids to begin with. From there, I'll demonstrate the breadth of my knowledge. I remember a prophecy I can use, some vague. In fact, maybe you can help make sure I've got it right. Argrave scratched his chin and then pointed, remembering something. Oh, and if that curmudgeonly bastard Roe the Righteous is there, he would be a great help in proving this matter. He's a very unreasonable person, but he's not inflexible. If I give him the signs, he'll accept the truth. Argrave nodded as his plan came together in his head. Annalise leaned back a little, evidently taken aback about what he disclosed. How much do you know about the Patriarchate of Vaiden? Argrave beamed. I know most things in heaven and earth, Horatio. His words fell flat, Annalise watching him blankly. Though I can't say I know every detail about every person, I know more about many important figures than even your patriarch. She crossed her arms, then spent some time deliberating on whether or not to say something. Knowing so much would probably make most people uncomfortable. Does that bother you? You tell me, Miss Empath. Argrave put his elbows on his knees and crossed his arms. You can read people very well. You can spot the emotions that most people try to hide. You see through my lies like they're glass. Even when I weave silver with my tongue, I have little doubt that makes many people uncomfortable. Does that bother you? He returned her words. Annalise's amber eyes shook for a moment. She took a deep breath and composed herself quickly. After some time, she asked, why are you telling me these things? Your knowledge of Vaiden, your plans. Argrave was taken aback by the question. Why was he telling her this? Because she asked would be the obvious answer. But then the further question would be why her, specifically. Was it merely because she was someone who would be prominent in the future? Argrave wasn't certain. Perhaps. Argrave mused. Perhaps it's merely therapeutic to finally share a little bit of what's going on inside my head. Who better to be honest with than someone who can see past this facade I try and put on? She nodded. Her composure returned. The waves beat against the side of the longship as a silence stretched out. You said my empathy would make many people uncomfortable. She let the words hang, and Argrave nodded. Does it make you uncomfortable? Argrave chuckled, and then leaned back against the ship. It might make me surprised, throw a wrench into the conversation that forces some semblance of honesty from me. Might make me mind my words a little bit. But uncomfortable? Not at all. Though Argrave had hoped for another smile, Annalise contemplated his words in silence. He shuddered as he felt a cool wind travel along his hair. It's pretty cold out here, Argrave commented, rubbing his hands together. Maybe it's because I don't have much blood, or body fat, or musculature. Though that can't help. The real reason is that we're getting closer to Vaiden. Annalise turned her head towards the bow of the ship. She pointed towards the horizon. There. You can see the coast, even. Argrave looked out, following her finger. The steady movement of the Vadimen rowing the oars threatened to pull away his attention, but he still looked. I see. A lot of blue. Mostly water, some of it sky. There's white there, too. Ocean foam. No coast, though. Argrave blew on his hands to ward off the cold. You have never sailed to Vaiden. We recognize the coast immediately. Some of that white you see is likely ice. I see. I see. Argrave pursed his lips, wondering how to phrase his question. You wouldn't happen to have any spare clothes, perhaps? Fur coats for the bloodless? Annalise stood up, walking to the mast. No. You will need to wait until we are back in the Patriarchate proper. Argrave let out a long sigh interspersed with shivers. He held his hands beneath his armpits. Slowly, he began to make out the coastline that Annalise had spotted. It came into view, long, broken fragments of ice drifting out in the ocean, and behind it, a coast. The navigator on the bow of the ship gave commands to the oarmen, and the ship expertly avoided the fragments of ice while traveling along the coast. In the distance, Argrave spotted a great spire of grey stone with a roaring black flame atop it. As Argrave remembered, it was this color to be visible in snowstorms. At night, it would become white. So was written in books, at least. The torch of Vade, Argrave muttered. The longship came around a bend, and a great harbor came into view. There were innumerable longships lined up. Argrave tried to count them and estimated them to be near 300. Many sailors tended to the ships, swarming around the docks. As they pulled closer to the landing, Argrave felt some swirling nervousness. He didn't have much reason to lack confidence in his plan, but that did not change the fact that he would be the sole human here, and he would need to go before the leader of this vast fleet and try to tell him to call off the invasion. Phew, Argrave sighed, placing a hand on his chest. Let's not fumble at the goal line. Chapter 34, Damned, Their Fate. Argrave walked out onto the docks with Annalise supporting him. She was around half a foot shorter than Argrave and the perfect height to support beneath his shoulder. Though he disliked touching others, of everyone, he was the most comfortable with Annalise as she had the decency to clean herself of blood. Even still, she smelled of sea salt, sweat, dirt, and blood, so it was a very unpleasant experience. He supposed it would be strange to expect her to smell like flowers, though. Argrave took in his surroundings. The wooden buildings along the coastline were wide and spacious, with great doorways and tall ceilings to accommodate the snow elves' larger frame. The architecture was plain and effective, yet it still had decorations. Trophies hung above doorways of homes, skulls of animals, tusks, and other vainglorious displays that showed to demonstrate what the house's family was capable of hunting. The windows were covered with fur blankets to block the snow and cold air. Fangs, claws, and tusks hung from the overhangs by twine, bumping against each other like grim wind chimes. With his focus back on the docks, Argrave noticed that nearly all of the sailors had stopped what they were doing. They stood a fair distance away from Argrave, watching him move. They spoke amongst themselves. Perplexed, Argrave looked in the distance. He saw a great group of people crowded together, watching the docks, and behind them, atop a great wooden building. He frowned. Is that a dragon? Though Argrave asked. He was certain it was. It was a great snow-white creature with a vast wingspan and 4 legs. It crouched at the back of the host awaiting him, its deep blue eyes staring ahead like 2 sparkling sapphires. Unlike Berenda, where some nobles and other important people had wyverns purchased from the desert tribes to the south. This was a bona fide dragon. Argrave had killed it many times before in game. Indeed, Vaiden had a dragon. I sent word ahead by bird so that the patriarch would not be surprised by your coming, Annalise explained. I know druidic magic too, after all. Did you tell them I'm Erlebner himself? Argrave asked incredulously. This welcome is a bit much. Annalise did not say anything further as she escorted him onto the docks. The mass amount of people waiting ahead was soon shadowed by the Vaidaimen on the longship following them behind. If the cold in the air didn't pierce bone deep, Argrave might have felt the situation heating up. Despite the great mass of people, the awkward shamble of Annalise and Argrave echoed loudly in the prolonged silence. Argrave started to recognize people as he came closer. Though he had never been to Vaiden before, many of the Vaidaimen came to Berenda. If the player chose to confront them militarily rather than diplomatically, one would have to go up against some of the game's hardest fights. Argrave had done that many times before, of course, if only for fun. He most often fought them while playing as Nicoletta. The Vaidaimen had killed her father. It made sense roleplay-wise. They stepped off the docks into the large ceiling where the great bulk of prominent snow elves had gathered. Argrave took his arm off Annalise and stood back straight. The Vaidaimen that had come with them walked around them, fading into the crowd. As Argrave scanned the crowd, seeing many faces he recognized, the people whispered among themselves. None addressed him, though. Argrave could vaguely see the Patriarch Idris sitting on a chair, flanked by many guards. Two men held the banner of Vaiden behind him, a black wheel on a field of red. Argrave took a few slow steps forward, his legs feeling weak and shaky. Despite his tremors, he didn't feel nervous at all as he spread his arms wide. It seems I'm expected. He spoke towards the Patriarch. Silence followed. From behind the crowd, Argrave could hear and see the breathing of the gigantic ice dragon, peering down at the scene like a great arbiter of his fate as icy air billowed from its nose. An old elf pushed through the crowd, shoving people aside with his walking stick. He had long, sagging skin and a bald head marred with liver spots. He walked forward, disturbing the uniformity of the crowd, before he stood between Argrave and the Patriarch. Show respect for the Patriarch, human. The Patriarch watched, casually leaning against his armrest, waiting for how Argrave would respond to Ro. Argrave smiled. Hello, Ro. Long time no see, he said with a grim undertone. This bastard's already in front of me. How many times have I fought this guy? 50. Near 100. Surely I could probably recite every spell he knows. Annoying fight. The old elf laughed, his lips curled in a snarl. So, it knows my name. I was not aware the humans already knew of me. No one human on Berenda knows of you. I do, though. I know you. I know your dragon, Crystal Wind. Argrave pointed to the towering reptile. His finger moved onwards, pointing out people in the crowd. I know the chief of Ryblood. I know the chief of Ryden. The chief of Balta, Lilin, Poro, Durandi, Tythukal. A lot of the high-ranking members of the Patriarchate are here. It's humbling. I've never been welcomed as an agent of Erlebner before. And you still haven't. Ro stepped forward. The Patriarch craned his neck to better look at Argrave, watching like it was a play rather than an audience. A little coaching from that girl born outside of Vaiden does not mark you as an agent of the God of Knowledge. Annalise, she told me nothing. Argrave shook his head. What more do you want as proof? I could tell you of how I knew of Gilliman, the exiled general and right-hand man of Draz. I could show you that I knew of your scouting party and Teros the Tempestuous. I might speak of the hidden tomb guardians I lured to get to parley with the attackers on Barden. I could share any number of truths. Delusions pass as truth, so long as the target believes in them. Argrave laughed. Fine, then. Let us speak of you. I know of the sword you keep hidden in that walking stick of yours, Argrave commented, kicking it with his foot. The old elf took a step back, bushy brows forming a deep frown. You call that dragon a sacred guardian of the Vaidaimen to boost morale, but it's really just bonded to you with S-rank druidic magic. That sent mutters through the crowd, and Ro's expression turned to one of wrath. The snow elf stepped forward, but Argrave did not let him speak. I've been through a lot to come here. I learned about the fate of this world not 2 or 3 months ago, and since then, I've been dragging myself through hell and back to do my duty. Argrave spoke, voice laced with conviction as he freed the indignance that had been brewing within him. Your foolish invasion might well be the largest contributor to this world's end, and so I came here personally to show you why you did wrong. Let me put it plainly, Ro. Argrave took a step forward. Get out of my way or get under my boot. The dragon growled, and its great serpentine tail rose into the air and crashed against the earth. A great burst of snow flew into the air, and Argrave felt the ground rumble beneath him. The beast was mirroring its master's anger. Ro was the personification of pride, zeal, and righteousness. Argrave could not reason with him, he could only suppress him. Of course, it took all Argrave's willpower to do this. He felt like a child scolding an adult that held a gun. Ro could kill him without much thought. Ro, a voice cut across the din. Stand down. Ro twisted his head back, wide eyes confronting the Patriarch. What? The aged elf spat. The boy shows a fundamental lack of respect. Just as Vaid stands behind the Vaidaimen, Erlebner stands behind that one. I think he has that right. Step aside. Ro trembled, but then eventually broke away, walking back into the crowd and disappearing. Patriarch Draz sat on a throne atop a palisade. He wore snow white armor, white fur on the shoulders and joints. His crown was absent, revealing his badly scarred bald head, but he had a matching helmet hanging from the back of the chair with a great mane of white fur standing up from the back. It looked ceremonial. It probably was. Patriarch Draz was an administrator and strategist, not a fighter. Glimmer had always been his fist. The Patriarch sat with one leg crossed over the other, lazily lounging against the armrest of his throne. For someone who was practically carried here, you speak very big words. A faint grin marked the elf's face. You should know a lot about that, Patriarch Draz, Argrave returned. The Patriarch uncrossed his legs and slouched to the opposite side of the throne. This meeting has been a long time coming. You've said, here we are. The precipice of your task. Tell me then, why exactly is this invasion, the purpose of my existence? The largest contributor to the world's end. Draz's words betrayed a fierce anger. Argrave wondered why Annalise had not included his purpose in her report, but he did not turn his head back to look at her. He mulled on the words for a time, ensuring he remembered them properly. Though Ro had to be suppressed, Draz was a fiercely intelligent man, and underneath his layers of casual dismissiveness, he was someone who fiercely loved his people and his goddess. Fortunately, Annalise had helped him remember a certain prophecy word for word. Argrave took a deep breath. The words he'd prepared were how Draz was convinced in the game, but it felt extremely nerve-wracking to do it in person. And there he came, the foul breath of oblivion, leaving even gods dying beneath his feet. The Black Blood, the Outcast, the Ghost Maker and Ghost Breaker. He is hunger, he is thirst, where he bites rots till it dies. The yellow eyes across his body glistened like oil beads, and the cries of the damned vanish into maleficent darkness in the winds of its steps. Argrave recited dramatically. When the moon blots out the suns, the tenebrous reaper rises, he who would judge the gods. Heed this warning, my descendants, and prepare for his coming. Patriarch Draz slowly sat up in his throne. He leaned forward, staring at Argrave. Heed this warning, your ancestors said, Argrave repeated. And have you? No. Evidently, number. You say this is the precipice of my task? Don't flatter yourself. Gerectic Kid is coming. You are but one pustule on this diseased world that I must fix before everything is lost. For the first time, the crowd broke out in chaos. The Patriarch stared ahead at Argrave as the people discussed what had been said amongst themselves. Argrave scratched at his throat. Quiet. A voice yelled out, and the dragon's tail struck the ground again. Ro waded back through the crowds. The tenebrous reaper? He questioned, coming close to Argrave. You are sure of this? Yes, Argrave said with conviction. Chant the path of the moon. Go to your holy sites, reach out to Vade, divine with animal guts. Consult Erlebner himself, if you can pay his price. The answer will all come out the same. In the coming years, Gerectic Kit will begin to partially manifest in places. Do you think it's a coincidence a civil war broke out on the eve of your invasion? His dark tendrils are already deeply rooted in Berenda, and in Vaiden. Ro did not know how to answer that. His head turned about, and his breathing grew more and more frantic. I must. He began but didn't finish the sentence. Ro turned and ran away. The Patriarch seemed to have gathered himself, and the crowd quieted after Crystal Wind's tail thump earlier. Draz stared at Argrave. This matter? You are Erlebn answer to it? You alone, against the tide? Argrave tilted his head. I don't know. I think I am. I hope I'm not. Argrave rubbed the bronze hand mirror in his breast pocket, then lifted his head up. Regardless, I will not stop until I am dead. Such is my duty. The Patriarch fell back into his chair, letting out a huff of air. I must summon everyone. We will speak on what you discussed. This invasion was started by council. If it is to end, it must also be by council. Fine, I've done my job. The time has come to do yours. This invasion, your life's purpose, won't have much meaning if there is no world left. Patriarch Draz visibly shook. He stood from his throne and stepped off the palanquin. Annalise, you brought this one here. Take him to the local chief's hall, and ensure he is safe while he is here. Argrave felt all the energy he'd mustered drain, and he veritably fell on top of Annalise when she walked up to him. You spoke well, she said. They must listen. I want to be suffocated in blankets. I hate the cold. Please take me inside, Argrave said quietly. Annalise's face warped, and then she laughed lightly. Chapter 35, Promising Prospects. Damn it, cursed Duke Enrico as he stared out into the distance at his domain. Now that war was upon them, he had donned his plate mail, the blue swordfish of Montesai embedded on its chest. He stood atop the walls of Maetoth, right beside one of the giant marble statues, as he stared out at the rising smoke in the distance. The boy was right, to the word. Nicoletta stepped forward to stand beside her father, arms crossed. The two seemed like echoes of each other with their similarly decorated armor, one plate, one leather. You could not have known. No one knew, besides him. And that's the mystery. How did he know? Perhaps the royal family's influence is greater in my domain than I expected. It's pointless to consider now. Henceforth, though, I'll follow his advice. He turned back. Knight Commander Rijah. Command the mage battalions to center their forces near the docks, preparing to counter magic. At once, Duke, with his voice echoing through his helmet, Raja bowed and then moved to obey. His heavy armor clanged noisily as he sprinted. The Duke turned back to Nicoletta. If we should survive this, I view our grave as your most promising marriage prospect. What? Nicoletta could not help but shout in surprise. He's my cousin. He has no force backing him, so he won't compete with you for control of the duchy when I pass. He's a bastard, so he should have no issue adopting the name of Montesi. He's a very promising mage and a brilliant strategist. He's young. Above all, you like him. The Duke continued, unaffected by her outburst. As do I. Nicoletta paused, taking a deep breath. You've spoken to him but once, and you like him? He's a friend, nothing more. Worse yet, he's near identical to Elwind. As I said, he's already family. That matters little. You have no shared ancestors beyond your mother. Duke Enrico shook his head. There should be no issues with your progeny. At the mental image her father's words gave her, she shook her head frantically. Father, please. No more discussions. When he returns. If he returns, Duke Enrico amended, I will send the proposal. Nicoletta opened her mouth to say more, but a voice from behind cut her off. Duke Enrico. A lightly armored gatekeeper ran up, breathing hard. Catch your breath, then speak. The Duke commanded. The gatekeeper did, and then he took off his helmet and wiped his face with his wrist. Two people are trying to enter the gate, Duke. One of them claims to be Knight Riles from Baden, bringing urgent news from the village regarding a mage. The other is a female mercenary with a giant sword seeking to help in the defense. Argrave went to Baden, Nicoletta said immediately. Oh! The gatekeeper exclaimed. That name was mentioned, young Lady Montesi. The Duke's expression hardened. Take this token. Find and command a High Wizard of the Grey Owl to examine both people for magic trickery before they enter. Send Knight Riles to me quickly. The gatekeeper took the token from the Duke's hands and stared at it, bewildered by the responsibility he'd just been given. He saluted the Duke and ran off once again. The Duke retrieved a seeing glass and looked out at the coastline, watching the movements of the longships as they collided with the Duke's caravels. Nicoletta looked up at the statue beside them, a distinct lack of conversation settling between the two as they waited. Nicoletta tapped her finger against her elbow as though to speed up time. She could not deny she was worried. That the knight was alive was a promising thing, but the fact he returned mentioning Argrave specifically could not be a good portent. The time stretched out for a long time, but it could not have been more than 15 minutes before a knight rushed to them, partially covered in blood and sand and very exhausted. Duke Enrico. He saluted once he'd catch his breath. Knight Riles. I was commanding the forces in Baden. And what led you to abandon your post? The Duke questioned sharply. On the eve of the battle, a spellcaster came to us. He offered the name. I think it was Argrave of Blackwood, and claimed that he was the Duke's agent, Riles said, speaking as though he was telling a big secret. He had the mark of Montesi, and so I took his advice in the battle. The name. I think he used that as an alias when he sold the Margrave's horse, Nicoletta offered. The Duke nodded to Nicoletta and turned back to the knight. And the Duke pressed. Later, he lured a force of metal creatures to the site of the battle. He used this horde to gain parley with the snow elves. He claimed he was an agent of the Duke, assigned by you to stop the invasion. The Duke furrowed his brows, and then ran a hand through his blue hair. What is he? Well, what happened then? He spoke to the snow elves' leader, and they came to an agreement. The knight hesitated as the questions did not head the direction he wanted. I believe he intended to sail with them to return to Vaiden in condition for cooperation killing the metal creatures. Did you see them sail away? Defeat the metal creatures? The Duke questioned, stepping closer. No, I thought he seemed too close to the snow elves, so I thought. Riles trailed off, taken aback by the intensity. The Duke grabbed the knight's breastplate and pulled him closer. You let Argrave fight that horde of monsters alone, and then let him sail to Vaiden by himself? He released, pushing the knight away. Damn it, this boy. I have no idea what he's up to. And you? He pointed to the knight. Join the garrison. You're stripped of command of Baden. The knight was rattled, and he stood there mute. Nicoletta, too, was startled by the news. She thought back on all of Argrave's actions. Each of them had seemed bizarre and arbitrary, but ultimately, they had clear purpose. He had returned her thesis to keep Montesi's reputation intact. He had gone with the Margrave despite the dangers to keep their house's relationships stable. He had attacked the Druidic scouts, alone, to bring the invasion to their attention. And now, Father, Nicoletta said, stepping forward. We can't do anything for him now, anyway. He acted alone, but I've never seen him act without a plan. Realistically, what he's done doesn't change what we need to do. We need only prepare for the defense. Duke Enrico turned back to his daughter. After a time, he nodded. Annalise strode through the long wooden hall before Argrave's room, a fur sack in her right hand. She had cleaned and changed into a more fitting white fur robe. Ahead, the door was slightly ajar, and a dim sliver of light peeked past. She started to hear noise from the room, and she slowed her footsteps and approached quieter. The noise became clearer. Argrave was singing. I lay here, he sung, drawing out the notes at points. Bedridden, imprisoned in me. I'm crippled and broken, alive and not free. The sun out my window, it warms me and leaves. No calls and no visits. Just me and my dreams. And I'm lonely." He embellished the last note. Her brows were furrowed in confusion, but Annalise could not help but smile. His singing was terrible, bluntly put. She pushed open the door and entered. He turned his head towards her. He was buried beneath white fur blankets, propped upright. His face brightened. "She returns. She's clean." Argrave spread his arms wide as though celebrating. "You look like a Russian princess with a fancy white fur coat. It suits you." Annalise walked up to him, sitting on the bedside and hefting the sack atop her legs. "What is a Russian princess?" Argrave paused for a while, and then smiled. "People never ask those sorts of questions. They just ignore my weird words and move on, unwilling to admit their own ignorance." "A Russian princess?" Argrave tilted his head back. "A Russian princess would probably have fair hair, pale skin, fancy fur clothes made right in Siberia, and an undeniable dignity befitting her station." Annalise's amber eyes seemed to study his face for a minute. Then, she pushed the bag she was holding towards Argrave. "Here, I brought preserved fishes and meat. Eating rich foods like this is the key to a speedy recovery. Healing magic cannot replace lost blood. Eating was what helped my mother grow back into good health whenever she grew ill." "How considerate." "It's been so long since I've had meat. When I was sick a few days ago, I was vomiting up everything that wasn't slush," Argrave said, voice straining as he leaned over to grab the bag. Argrave opened the bag, pulling free thick strands of red, dried meat. He bit into it. Like jerky, if a bit plainer and a lot tougher. While glancing about the room, Annalise rested her hands on her lap. Barring a few shelves with nothing on them and a window closed off with a fur blanket, the room was empty. "The Patriarch's Council listened to me briefly, and then kicked me out," Annalise said. "I suspect a conclusion will not be reached tonight. You may be called tomorrow." Argrave divided a piece of meat with his hands into small, bite-sized pieces. "What? You just gave your account and they booted you?" "Yes," she confirmed. "That's stupid. You would have the most insight on the situation." Argrave put a meat bite in his mouth and chewed on it quietly. "Perhaps I should not complain. I get to eat, after all." She turned her head back to him. "You seem to place a lot of value on me." Argrave paused. It sounded like an arrogant statement, but it was just her neutral observation of the situation. In Heroes of Berenda, Argrave had fought against Annalise and worked alongside Annalise in destroying Gerectic Kiet. In both scenarios, she was a very powerful person. Part of it was her high magic pool coupled with a high magic affinity. Elsewise, she simply knew a lot of good spells. He supposed that was tinting the way he treated her. He chewed another bit of meat as he considered his response. He made sure to swallow completely before speaking, as he loathed when people spoke with their mouths full. "You possess a fiercely inquisitive nature coupled with a good head on your shoulders. Those values combined are a formula for success. To top it off, you wield magic well, you have a talent for strategy, and you can read people like I read books." Argrave locked eyes with Annalise. "I think those features make you exemplary. I have little doubt you will achieve great things." "Is that so?" "I will remember that, then." She nodded with a faint smile. "Achieve great things," she repeated, musing over the words. A vague term, meaning different things for every person. Still, it's a nice sentiment. "True enough." "What great things call out to you?" Argrave ate another bit of meat. Annalise leaned back, resting her hands against the bed. "All around me, I see people planning to make a legacy." She closed her eyes. "They want to be a part of the invasion of the Greenlands, be a part of the legend of the Snow Elves. They want to start a family, leave behind the next generation. Even the spellcasters want to advance magic to another level. All wish to be remembered." She turned her head back to Argrave and opened her eyes. "They're all planning for their deaths. At least, that's what I feel." "Kind of grim, but you're not wrong. They want to keep living, in whatever manner that might be left for them. Live on through their deeds, their words, their achievements." Argrave reached back into the bag and pulled out a strip of pink meat that smelled fishy. "Myself, I much prefer plain old living." "Me too," Annalise agreed quietly. "I think I just want to know and understand the world as much as I can, and I want to pursue that freely." Argrave broke up the strip of fish into bits as he did the previous strip. "There's a lot to know. Berenda alone is full of mysteries. Even though I know a lot about the Veydaman, before this, I'd never been to Veyden." Argrave was about to put another bit in his mouth, but he paused. "That reminds me, there's supposed to be a big library here in Veyden, right? Full of druidic spells, deep lore, and other such fascinating things." "I mean, druidic magic doesn't even exist on Berenda. It's in the capital, behind the ice wall." "But yes." Annalise sat up. Argrave pursed his lips. "Do you think I could get in there? I mean, surely these deliberations will take some time, and I don't think that I'm really urgently needed, per se." Annalise shook her head. "You must rest. You should not overstrain yourself, but." Argrave trailed off. "I have some books among my things," she said with a smile. "If you like, I can lend you some." His grim countenance started to brighten. "Truly? Spell books, even?" "Yes." Annalise stood. "I'll go get them." Chapter 36, Leave It to Fate. Argrave adjusted the white fur coat over his leather gear, covering himself well. He had no mirror to look at himself in, so he briefly looked down and examined himself. He rapped his knuckles against the bronze hand mirror in his breast pocket, and then turned to the door. Annalise stepped forward, handing him a simple brown cane. Argrave took it and set it against the ground, grinding it against the wood to test it. "Thank you. Let's not leave the patriarch waiting. Even if he so graciously decreed we could come at our leisure." Annalise nodded, and she pushed open the door, gesturing for Argrave to proceed. He brushed his hair back with a gloved hand, and then proceeded down the hallway of the local chief's residence. Annalise soon joined by his side, having no issue keeping up with his slow pace. "Come to think of it, I don't even know what this city is called," Argrave commented as they walked. "Katla," Annalise answered. "It is the largest port for both raids and fishermen. When the winter is cruel, some warriors sail out to the sea in search of a settlements to raid. Of course, now that Vaiden has been united, it is the natural place for a fleet to harbor." The two came to the set of stairs. Argrave grit his teeth and proceeded downwards slowly, the cane clicking ever so slowly. When he reached the bottom, he felt a small sense of accomplishment. He pressed forward down the main hall and soon pushed open the main doors. Light reflecting off the white snow blinded him, and he shielded his eyes as they adjusted. As the scene spread out before him, Argrave found his eyes darting from place to place, taking in his surroundings. Snow elves worked at pushing away snow from the windows and doors. Near the partially snow-buried walls of the city, a group of hunters worked at skinning a gargantuan white cat. One hunter held open its mouth, while another pulled free the crystalline teeth decorating its jaw. Elsewhere, a great deal of snow elves sat on the ground, holding chunks of raw ebon ice in their hands. They used a chisel and hammer to chip away at it, refining it into axe blades. When they were finished, they would hand it to another person, who attached it to a firm dark wooden stick. Fish and meat were hung up to dry, while butchers chopped fresh meat and doused it with sea salt to preserve it. Everyone walking about was wearing some amount of fur to keep themselves warm. The vast majority of those wandering were warriors. There was a clear tension in the air, an uncertainty, especially when they saw Argrave. Doubtless everyone had heard the rumor of the mortal agent of Erlebni. He was the only human here. "Argrave?" asked Annalise, puzzled by his pause. Argrave gathered himself. "Sorry, simply enjoying a new sight, a new culture. It's one thing to read what little anecdotes exist of Vaiden in Berenda. It is another to be there, in person, experiencing it. Frankly, I had thought I would be speaking to Patriarch Draz when he came to Berenda, not the other way around. Didn't expect to render unto him. I quite like it." Argrave proceeded onwards, feet sinking into the snow alongside his cane. It took a great deal of effort to walk through snow, and so he slowed his pace so as not to overexert himself. "Much of Vaiden is inarable, yeah?" Argrave asked Annalise. "Your primary sources of food are meat and fish for those reasons." "Yes, even with earth magic to till the fields, crops refuse to grow, as though the land is cursed. Legends say that druidic magic was made for that reason. In recent years, though, Patriarch Draz has found ways to circumvent the poor land. We take hardy seeds from the human continent, and we sow them atop graveyards. There is no lack of dead in Vaiden." Argrave nodded. "When you've got frozen soil and ornery creatures like that kitty over there rampaging about, it isn't difficult to see why you turn to invasion, either." Argrave kept his gaze on the white cat. "Out of curiosity, what do your parents do?" "My father is dead. He was a hunter, but he died in battle when Patriarch Draz united the tribes. My mother is still young and she helps craft clothes of fur where she can, but she grows sick frequently. My younger sister is taking care of her." "I thought Ro mentioned she was born outside of Vaiden." Argrave deliberated on whether to bring that up, but he did not wish to be inconsiderate. "I'm sorry about your father," Argrave said after pausing in the road. "I don't mean to pry, but do you resent Draz for that?" "Somewhat," she nodded. "But in Vaiden, one truth persists and allows us to survive, despite the environment. The tribe is more important than the individual. Patriarch Draz has made us great. Over time, I came to accept what happened." Argrave felt pensive after her words, and the two proceeded onwards in silence. It was a vastly different sentiment than many pursued on Earth. Most modern cultures pursued individualism and personal happiness, putting a nation before a person. It was a foreign mindset. Maybe it was necessary in this world, and indeed, maybe their conquest would allow peace to reign and society to develop once the embers of war had settled. Ultimately, it's not my concern. My duty is dealing with Gerectic Kiat while dealing with world-changing events as best I can. "You should tell me of human society sometime," Annalise interrupted his thoughts. "Knights and chivalry, enchanted items, illusion magic. None exist in Vaiden." Argrave smiled. "I certainly can." He paused. "Although, I have to return to Berenda soon for my next task." "No rest for the wicked, you know the rules." If Annalise was dispirited by his answer, she did not show it, answering quickly, "I assumed as much." She caught Argrave's sleeve, pointing. "This way." Argrave changed direction to where she was pointing. She led him to a large house where a great many Vaidaman warriors stood out front. When the snow elves saw him, they tensed. The effect he had as the purported mortal agent of Erlebna was quite astonishing. He would be sure to use this card in the future. Hopefully. He wouldn't awake one morning to a long-armed creature admonishing him for his misuse of the title. The Patriarch awaits inside, one of the guards said, pushing open the door and dipping his head slightly in a show of respect. Argrave nodded back, and then proceeded inside. Annalise followed, and then the door was shut behind them. Ahead, Driz sat at a desk, holding a quill above some leathery parchment that was certainly not paper. Just as many guards stood behind Driz as there were outside. In walks the agent of the Omniscient, Driz greeted, setting his quill aside and leaning back in his chair. Erlabni just reads frequently. No omniscience involved. Such is the power of a well-read god. The Patriarch chuckled. You've given me the worst headache I've had in years. Maybe the worst headache ever. I was the primary proponent of this invasion, rousing the warriors' blood in what remained of the conquered tribes. Now, to reverse sides? Driz tapped his temple and shook his head. It was a sleepless night. And what is the outcome? To be determined? Argrave paused, lowering his head. Or will I need to do something drastic? Driz's white eyes locked onto Argrave. You are awfully bold. Even the best of my warriors and mages do not speak so candidly, threatening to cause trouble in my tribe. If there's one thing I am, it's honest, Argrave lied, glad that Annalise was not looking at him presently. The Patriarch clicked his tongue. You should thank Ro. He was so desperate to prove you wrong. He tried every method he could think of to poke a hole in what you had said. When he found that everything supported you, he threatened to have Crystal Wind eat anyone who dissented. I started to question who really led the tribe. So this means it should be obvious, Driz said, rubbing his eyes. The invasion will cease. Argrave took a deep breath and exhaled. He felt like he'd just won a tournament, or maybe a lottery. His body shook a little, but he quickly got himself under control. Goddamn, Argrave said aloud. The fruits of my labor have offered a savior. If this were a speedrun to stop the Vadiman invasion, I'd be sitting pretty with the any percent world record. Mateth stays standing. Duke and Rico lives. Nicoletta is spared losing her father. But the Patriarch tapped his desk. As far as I'm concerned, the invasion is merely delayed in the wake of the Tenebrous Reaper, Gerektik Kiet. We will offer full support in defense of the world, when the time of his descent comes. That's more than I could ask for. Even being neutral is a great boon, Argrave commended, pleased beyond measure. That said, the attack on Mateth will continue as planned. If Gerektik Kiet manifests on Berenda, as seems to be the case, it will be convenient to have the armies land at a safe port. Driz leaned back in his chair, watching Argrave. Argrave's face twisted. What? You're still going to try and seize Mateth? Yes. Driz nodded intently. Regardless of the outcome, the invasion will cease. I will leave things in the hand of Vade. Let her dictate what should happen, if Mateth should stay in human hands or fall to the Vadiman. Argrave stood, mouth agape for a second. But that's just a pointless waste of life, both for Vaiden and for the humans. Patriarch Driz sat unmoving. As I said, Vade will dictate the outcome. And frankly, this was the only compromise the more militant chiefs would relent to. It serves as a demonstration that the choice isn't merely cold feet. I suspect it will happen today. The orders were sent out this morning. Argrave stared at Driz with brows furrowed, running the scenario in his head. As things clicked into place, he confronted an unpleasant reality. Frankly, it would be better for me if Vaiden did seize Mateth. They are my staunchest allies, and their forces are among the strongest in the game. I could use their might for future conflicts. The populace within Mateth was never badly affected by the invasion past the initial assault. Many of the services and merchants would remain open to me. At worst, I lose the money from selling foam spire. Argrave looked to the ground, turning around. But how am I to speak to Nicoletta? To Mina? Hell, even to that German shepherd, Elias. Even if it only has been a brief time, I want to keep those ties. Argrave paused as his thoughts took a darker turn. And that's only if they live. Argrave turned the gears in his head as fast as they would go, trying to come up with some way to change this outcome. He could not warn them. He had no way of doing so. He could not explain the situation, and even if he could not ask Duke Enrico to abandon his city. When he asked himself how to convince Draz, his mind came up blank. Almost instinctually, Argrave reached into his breast pocket and pulled free the bronze hand mirror. He studied it, sealing away his emotions. What I want stopped being important 2 months ago. I have to stop Gerektik Kiet, for my own sake just as much as the world's. Any advantage counts. He turned back to Patriarch Draz. Leave it to fate. Then, he nodded slowly, stowing away the mirror once more. I hope you say that truly, and don't intend to do anything drastic as you mentioned earlier, Draz cautioned. No. As you said, it would be a strategic advantage for the future. Draz looked a little surprised, but he hid it quickly. Then that is all. I will promulgate this fact in the days to come, but for now, you are among the first to know. Oh, and I had a question. Yes. Argrave prompted. How is Gilliman? Draz leaned in. Argrave smiled. He doesn't talk about himself much, but I think he's the same as ever. You know how he is. The strong, silent type. Patriarch Draz laughed knowingly. Yes, if it's like that, then he is well. I hope you treat him well. Despite what transpired, he is still a dear friend to me. I hope to never see him again. What a bizarre arrangement of sentences, Argrave commented. But such is the fate of an exile. A fascinating bit of Vaidens culture. Even the outcasts are still loved, mostly. Indeed, Dres nodded. You're free to roam, as I don't think you're a considerable threat. Ro would probably enjoy speaking to you, even if he won't admit it. And if you wish to, you might visit Gilliman's family. His son was too young to join the invasion, but his wife has been a tremendous help in making clothing. I am sure they would be pleased to hear of him. Argrave nodded. Both of those things sound very interesting, he said. Truly, Argrave's mind was on Mateth. He felt a black pit in his stomach. What he was doing was pragmatic. It would be a good thing if they lost, he told himself. But in his heart, he hoped they prevailed. Patriarch, said Annalise, stepping forth. I had a request. Certainly. I can at least hear you out, considering who you brought to me. She placed her hand on her heart. I would like to travel with Argrave in order to help deal with Gerektik Kiet. Argrave turned his head and widened his eyes in surprise. The Patriarch, too, was taken aback. The future chief strategist of Vaiden wants to come with me? Argrave dialogued internally. Well, the invasion is ceasing. She'll have no opportunities to grow in that manner. And if she's with me, well, I can raise her into a damned magic monster. She's got crazy talent. Argrave chimed in. That sounds like a wonderful idea. He was never one to pass up an opportunity. Chapter 37, Songs of War. Explosions, crackling lightning, and blades of wind collided above the sea in a grand display of power. The air around Mateth echoed with the songs of war. The sea itself seemed to have caught fire, most of Montesi's war caravels sinking into the sea. Corpses and wreckage alike bashed against the docks and ships, carried by the churning sea. The snow elves' longships bounced up and down on the tumultuous tide, each one filled to the brim with potent spellcasters and warriors. Magic changed the face of siege warfare. Nicoletta's father had taught her that, and it stuck with her. Perhaps her father's emphasis on the power of magic was precisely why she had gone to the Order of the Grey Owl, that, and her mother had been a high wizard of the Order. Nicoletta's love of magic had its foundations in her own spirit, though. In ages long since past, before magic was as prominent and as powerful as it was today, sieges were often long and drawn out. The invaders, superhuman or no, could seldom break stone with their hands. They would build siege weapons and batter them against the walls, or more often, simply starve out the defenders. It was a cruel and tedious process, as befitted an age before chivalry and knighthood. A throwing axe struck the stone near Nicoletta, its deafening ring drawing her back to attention. Mina slapped her shoulder and shouted, Nikki, don't worry about the coast. Nicoletta nodded, looking back down to the invaders on the ground while crouching behind a parapet. Duke Enrico had taken command of the forces near the docks. He had asked for Nicoletta to remain here where she might be safer and helpful. That was despite her insistence that she should be alongside the spellcasters, being one herself. Raja commanded the troops managing the walls. Only a few mages remained on the wall's walkways, the bulk dealing with the coastal invaders. The enemy on the ground did not have an exceptional number of mages. Many of their number had ways to counter magic, the strange material known as ebonice that Argrave had mentioned. The elven invaders stayed far from the tall walls, not daring to try tunneling or climbing. Their javelins and axes were accurate. Many good men and women had died before Nicoletta's eyes, head cleaved in twain by a thrown weapon. They're gathering their mages together, Raja shouted, loud voice breaking through the din. Mages, prepare for an assault. Focus on me, the big man commanded, moving to a central point on the wall. Nicoletta peeked above the parapet, being mindful of thrown projectiles. As Raja said, the troops were bunching together, the lightly armored mages speaking amongst themselves in preparation for something. A good deal of warriors gathered together, shield and axe clenched tightly. The mages got behind them, and a great tempest began to swirl across the trampled crops. Then, a group of Vaidaimen ascended into the air at a constant pace, a whirling gale beneath their feet. Nicoletta widened her eyes, taking an instinctive step away as they soared through the sky. One archer had the bearing to fire an arrow, and it struck one of the airborne snow elves, sending him spinning free of the magic lifting them. He slammed into the corner of the parapet, cracking it before tumbling down to the ground. Their magic wore off at a certain height and the remainder alighted loudly on the center of the wall. They were only 5. These bastards are insane, Mina shouted from beside Nicoletta, moving towards the encroaching snow elves with hands outstretched and magic matrices forming in front of her palms. Wait. Nicoletta tried to stop Mina, but her hands grabbed air. Many defenders stepped away from the cover of the parapets, panicked by the sudden intrusion. The elven invaders outside coordinated their attack with this occurrence. Without cover, some of the defenders were snagged by thrown weapons. Nicoletta stood, recalling something Argrave had told her. Wind magic, for instance, utterly invalidates bows, crossbows, and other such ranged projectiles. She cast the D-rank, wind burst, and a gale surged from her fingers. The throwing weapons closest veered away wildly, all their accuracy gone. Nicoletta rushed forth, casting another spell, wind wall, stopping another wave of axes and javelins tossed at their heads. With some reprieve from the relentless barrage of projectiles, Nicoletta diverted her attention back to those on the wall. The snow elves on the walls were massive. Each was near or as tall as Argrave, Yet unlike him, their frames were full and robust and covered in plate armor. The fact that they tried such a ridiculous gambit was a testament to their resolve. When the defenders rushed to confront the intruders, they proved their strength. The first of the knights approached the Vadaimon cautiously, shield held out. The vanguard of the Vadaimon stepped forward decisively, swinging his axe at a perfect distance. The knight received the attack with the top of his shield, but the axe's beard hooked onto the shield. The snow elf pulled, unbalancing the knight and jamming his round shield into the man's face. The knight fell onto his back, and then was quickly dispatched by an axe to the head. Though the snow elves only numbered 5 and were quickly surrounded, each one was a ruthless force. They jumped from opponent to opponent with a military efficiency, never allowing the defenders to take advantage of their numbers. The mages had no opportunity to avoid friendly fire. Nicoletta prepared some magic, but she stopped herself. This force of 5 men could not hope to seize the walls alone. They were a distraction. She turned back to watch the mages. They're preparing to launch more mages, Nicoletta shouted. More of the elves are being launched over. Disengage, prepare wind magic to block them in the air. There was some hesitancy as the command did not come from Raja, but the knight commander promptly shouted, do as she says. He went forth to meet the Vadaimon, his great sword held out before him. She had thought Raja was a large man, but he seemed short and stout compared to the giant elves. The mages came behind Nicoletta and collaborated, preparing wind magic. When more of the elves came ascending towards the walls, a great tempest rocked forth, wind blades and fell gales working in tandem. The elves held their shining black axes out, and though the magic was dispelled, their brief wind magic countered their momentum. The elves could not make it to the top of the walls, and they slammed against the side impotently. One managed to grab the ledge, pulling herself up. Something red flashed by Nicoletta peripheries, and then a woman stepped forward, kicking the elf trying to climb up with a steel plate boot. The invader fell from the wall, flailing and yelling as she dropped. The new arrival bore a giant Zweihanda and had a plumed telebarret. She peered over the side of the parapet, sword on her shoulder. These elves have guts. Nothing like the forest dwellers, the woman snickered. She turned back to Nicoletta and adjusted her hat. A chain dangled from her left hand, most of it hidden beneath frilly clothing and plate armor. I'm Melanie. You'll keep the flying squirrels away, right? Right, Nicoletta nodded. Good. Melanie smiled, the scars on her pretty face twisting. Her red hair swayed behind her as she ran to the 5 on the wall. She grabbed a knight's head and used him to launch herself in the air, twisting gracefully before slamming down her blade on one of the Vadaimon. He received it with his round shield but was forced back many steps. Raja was locked in combat with a female elf, trying his best to maneuver his sword past her shield. His blade snaked past the top, glancing against her helmet, but she bashed him with her shield. She swung, but Raja blocked her axe with the great sword's guard. He kicked her shin and then grabbed the shield, trying to force an opening. They were deadlocked for a moment, but then Mina materialized out of thin air from behind, breaking free of an illusion spell. She held her hand to the Vadaimon's knee and cast a spell, cutting past the armor and sending the elf staggering. The snow elf lunged at Raja, grabbing him by the shoulders and pushing him to the edge of the wall. Raja's back arched as he struggled not to fall, but the snow elf locked her leg behind him, and they both fell off the wall into the city below. Knight Commander, Nicoletta shouted vainly, looking over the edge. She could see movement, but neither stood. They were both probably wounded badly. She could not help but think of how long she'd known Raja, since when she was young to now. Nicoletta brushed aside her bubbling thoughts, looking back out to the elven mages. With their second wave stopped by her efforts, they did not dare to recklessly waste more lives. On the battlements, the red-haired mercenary Melanie helped the knights regain their composure. A hook attached to a chain hung from her left hand. She whirled it about like a sling, and then sent it at one of the Vadaimon. It was blocked, but the hook sunk into the wood. The Vadaimon tried to pull Melanie towards him with the hook in his shield, but she jumped, pulling herself with the chain. She flew through the air with tremendous speed. Her boots slammed into his breastplate, and he was launched into the other Vadaimon. After a brief tumble, she landed atop him. She pulled the hook free of his shield and used it to slice open his throat. The mercenary did not wait to watch him die, rising to confront the 3 remaining. The knights surrounded the Vadaimon like a pack of wolves, lunging forward to nip at their heels with their swords. Once more, Mina's illusion spell shattered, and she appeared in the middle of the 3 circle. Nicoletta's heart soared with unabated worry, and she broke into the fastest run she ever had. Mina cast a wind spell, sending one of the elves staggering into the crowd of knights where he was promptly killed. She tried to duck away to safety, but one of the snow elves turned and swung his axe in the same movement. Nicoletta pushed through the crowd and jumped between Mina and the axe, casting a D-rank ward. The black ebony axe broke through the barrier with ease. It struck her leather armor and the enchantments shone brightly, rebounding the axe. The snow elf recoiled, and Nicoletta caught Mina and slid away. Above, she heard the sound of a chain swinging and striking metal. She stood, leading Mina away from the battle. Stop doing dangerous things, Mina, Nicoletta insisted into the girl's ears. All around us is danger, the young woman panted. If I do nothing, Montesai will lose everything. You'll lose everything. You're part of that everything. A big part of it, Nicoletta said. Ugh, Mina grunted, face red. Grave was right. After this is over, you and I have to have a talk. A long one. Nicoletta stared at Mina for a time, and then nodded intently, unable to discern what she meant. Behind her, the two Vadimen remaining finally fell to superior numbers. The mercenary Melanie finished the last of them, jamming her Zweihänder into his stomach and casting him to the ground. Nicoletta gave a sigh of relief as the largest crisis they'd faced on the walls came to an end. She broke away from Mina, striding towards the mages and commanding, "Mages, keep an eye on the enemy. Ensure this doesn't happen again." She heard words of confirmation and saw some nods and was content to go back to watching the enemy for further movements. However, she spotted a message carrier running across the walls towards their position and kept a wary eye on the man ahead. "You did pretty good, little miss," said the red-haired mercenary Melanie, coming to watch the invaders just behind her. "Lots more could have died without the right organization there." Nicoletta did not know how to respond, but she kept her eye on the messenger running towards them. Evidently, the man was seeking her out. She broke away from the wall, staying within cover but moving to meet the man. "Young Lady Montesai," the man shouted, coming to a stop. "The Duke has been injured," he panted. "He designated you to take command of the forces at the dock should this occur." As Nicoletta processed the news, Mina stepped forward. "I'll come with you, but Knight Commander Ryder isn't." Nicoletta looked over at where the man had fallen. She could not help but whip her head to Melanie. "Mercenary Melanie, you're the best fighter here, but do you have any experience leading troops?" The woman nodded, a smile on her face. Nicoletta returned the nod, and then said, "Make sure the garrison does not fall. Montesai rewards the worthy generously." "I know. That's why I'm here," Melanie said, hefting her giant sword over her shoulder. "But how can we trust her?" Mina stopped Nicoletta. "Do you believe the snow elves have human agents?" Nicoletta rebutted. "Lead me," Nicoletta ordered the messenger, following close behind as he ran across the walls. Her father's condition dominated her thoughts. Chapter 38, Scorched Earth. Argrave swished water through his mouth and spit it out into the snow as he walked. Ahead of him, a neatly cobbled stone road wended across an endless field of white snow. His cane clicked against the stone as he moved. The center of the road had black crystalline objects embedded in them, faintly shining in the daylight. Argrave put his feet on one of the black crystals, and he felt heat emanating from them. "You clean your mouth every morning and night." "A human ritual?" Annalise inquired. She and Argrave had been talking non-stop during his tenure as a god's mortal agent in Vaiden. She was an endlessly curious person, and Argrave was fascinated by a culture that was largely absent in Heroes of Berenda. They had been exchanging questions every waking second. Argrave smiled widely, deliberately showing all of his teeth. "No, a personal ritual. I have been blessed with veritable pearls for teeth, and I wish to keep them that way," Argrave said with exaggerated cheer. He turned his head back to the road. "You know, I'm surprised to find paved roads in a desolate place like this." "No offense, of course," he added. "The roads are heated, even. I thought I would likely die from cold." They are new. Collaborative efforts by many mages melded the earth to form these roads. After, craftsmen placed those hot crystals to keep the snow from building up. Annalise kneeled down and pointed, carrying on her explanation with expertise. "When the snow melts from the crystal's heat, it seeps into the road through some purifying minerals. Aqueducts below the surface carry it to the city's wells." Argrave's brows furrowed in contemplation, but he smiled. "That's very fascinating. You know much about most things in this place." Annalise stood up, staring up at him with her amber eyes. "It is as I told you. I enjoy understanding and learning about the world." "Looks like I chose the right tour guide to Vaiden, then." Argrave nodded. "Come to think of it, that's probably why you wanted to come with me on my fool's errand." "It wasn't the only reason, but yes, it was the largest factor." Annalise nodded. "What you're doing is important. I want to be a part of it." "That's it?" Argrave pressed. "You want to come with someone you barely know to be a part of something important?" "I do not think I can be satisfied waiting here in Vaiden, honing my magic quietly." Annalise shook her head. "Maybe what you said about me achieving great things got to me. Maybe I also want to leave behind a legacy. All I know is that I want to do this." Argrave nodded. "Well, you won't be dying. There'll be no legacy. You'll be a living legend. I'll make damn sure of that." Annalise nodded, and then she carried on down the road. "What do you hope to find in Vaiden's capital, behind the ice wall, besides Gilliman's family?" Argrave turned on his heel and continued walking. "Lots of druidic magic. As much as I would love to waste away my days reading a new culture's writings, I'm on a schedule. I need to get what's useful to me. Berenda has no druidic magic. It's exclusive to Vaiden. Beyond just learning it, I could propagate it and make a fair bit of money. I don't think such a thing would be unethical in the face of a world-ending calamity. Ro manages all of the spellbooks in Vaiden. You will not be able to take them without his permission. So I'll get it," Argrave said without much concern. "I can trade illusion magic or the process for creating enchanted items, both of which the Vadimen lack. Such things would bolster your forces and make the future battle with Gerectic Kiant easier." Annalise nodded. Argrave rubbed at his stomach as they proceeded down the road. He noticed he was gritting his teeth, and not from the cold. Annalise watched him. "Are you all right?" she asked. Argrave paused in the road as a cold wind blew by, sending Annalise's incredibly long hair waving about in the wind. Once the wind settled, Argrave said, "No, I'm not, if you care to know the truth." Guilt gnaws at my stomach. I feel like I'm going to vomit. Over Mateth? Annalise pressed. "What do you think?" Argrave said snappily. "Came all this way. Did everything I could to try and change what I viewed as an inevitability. I get to the end, and I think I've won. I've done it. All this, only to have that victory flavored with death and misery. And for what? What does this achieve?" Argrave held his hands up. "Bupkis. Nada. Makes me sick." And back there I just threw in the towel, because it was the strategic thing to do. Argrave did a hand puppet impression of himself. Stood there like a drooling idiot, smiling and nodding. Argrave continued his rant. "No resistance. And I tell myself, Drew's already made up his mind. You can't change that. Or, the battle is already happening, and you can't change that. The simple fact is, I didn't even try. And now, try as I might to think of something I might do to change the outcome, my mind's just drawing blank." I missed my window. Annalise stood by quietly as Argrave proceeded. "It's just a reminder of how useless I am. Impotent. I can't." Argrave's voice trailed off as a lump grew in his throat. I settled for second best. Couldn't find the perfect solution. I should have gone to that councilor's held even if I was coughing blood. Now I just have to sit by, hat in my hand, and come back like some sort of savior when I didn't change anything. What good am I? Nothing changes, time's still a flat fucking circle. Argrave tossed his cane to the road and threw up his hands. Annalise waited in silence for some time. She picked up Argrave's cane and handed it back to him. "That Daedras summoned us. He told you to come at your leisure. Do you think that was not deliberate?" By the time you two spoke, the vanguard was likely already moving. Argrave opened his mouth to answer, but closed it quickly, expression pensive. From the beginning, Druz would never have abandoned his ambition of earning a foothold on Berenda. The battle may have been already underway while the two of you spoke that morning, Annalise stated, her passive tone making the words sound cold. "It's probably why Druz removed me from the council. If I brought news of his intentions to you, you might have done something. At least, that's my conjecture." Argrave could only stare for a moment. He swallowed, and then took the cane. He weighed it in his hands. "That does seem like something he would do. Now I'm here, isolated. He gave me free reign of the whole place." Argrave spread his hands to the snowfields and the forests beyond them. "Because he knew I could do nothing to stop it. I have no allies here. Could send a useless letter, at most. Maybe not even that. He takes Mateth, then holds it until Gerektik Kiet comes." "Why are you so certain Mateth will fall without your help?" Annalise pushed. "Because," Argrave began, cutting himself off before he could say, "It always happens." "Whatever," he finally said, lowering the cane to the ground. Gilliman was right. I'll get lost if I focus on what-ifs. Have to keep moving forward. Have to get used to this. A spear of ice surged through the air. A few people on the docks jumped backwards moments before the spear pierced the docks and sent wood splinters whistling through the air and into the water. Once it settled, some people moved past it while readying magic, but one of the men that had jumped shouted, "Watch out!" Moments before the spear of ice exploded into smaller fragments. The closest turned into a veritable fine red mist, and many others reeled away with shards of ice stuck in them. All of the people on the docks were solely dedicated to defending against the onslaught. The magic attacks from the Vadaimon aboard their longships came in concentrated waves, a few seconds of intense power, followed by many periods of silence. Their strategy was effective, too. A few seconds of intensity was much harder to hold back than a steady wave which one could adapt and adjust to. The area between the docks and the longships was no man's land. The force from each clash was enough to set the sea churning. The tides roared against the docks, and the longships tossed and turned in the tumultuous sea. Their oars worked to push them closer to the docks that the warriors aboard might seize the city. Nicoletta and Mina worked their way through Mateth. Nicoletta was taller, but Mina was much more agile. They wound through the alleyways as they made their way to the docks. When both emerged, a mage spotted them, and after leaving a ward behind, he waved them over. "Young Lady Montesai," the man greeted loudly. "The messenger reached you. Good." "Bracco," Nicoletta returned, running to the man. "Where's my father?" "How is he?" "He's in the customs office," Bracco responded promptly, pointing at a building very close to the docks. "He's being tended to by the best healers, but he's unconscious." Nicoletta looked at the building, and as she did, another wave of spells rocked the docks. She instinctually ducked, shielding Mina with her arm and falling back. Bracco was considerably less phased. When the battle calmed, Bracco said, "If the Duke hadn't concentrated mages near the docks at the last second, we would have fallen apart in a matter of seconds." Initially, the best of their mages started to freeze the oceans while their warriors walked across. It was the strangest form of battle I'd seen. Their ice magic is extremely potent. Furthermore, archers aboard their boats have magic dispelling enchantments. Nicoletta turned away from the customs building, deciding to take Bracco's word that her father was fine. "Their archers aren't using enchantments. It's airborne ice," Nicoletta declared, walking closer to the docks and surveying the scene. That's also why attack magic isn't working. It dispels magic on contact. She watched the longships steadily moving closer, and she took a deep breath. Father can't command, but he's taught me a lot. I need to calmly assess the situation. Think back to what was planned. Nikki, I can use illusion magic to project your voice. The higher-level spellcasters will naturally resist it, but they'll notice it. It should help you command. Mina contributed, coming to stand beside her. Our advantage lies in our position. Their advantage lies in their ebony arrows. They suffer because they're at sea, Nicoletta muttered to herself, rubbing her chin with her gauntleted hand. The sky cracked with another volley of spells. Nicoletta could see faint black lines in the air, and where they touched, wards and spells alike broke apart. Few struck the mages themselves, but they broke defenses and allowed spells to penetrate. Bracco, Nicoletta said, determination lining her voice now. Send off someone to retrieve a group of archers, 20 at least. Even if they need to be pulled from the walls, bring them here. Instruct them to scavenge the arrows with the black arrowheads, then wait for my command to fire. Young Lady Montesi, bringing such a large contingent of, no arguments. We're fighting a losing battle, Bracco, she retorted back quickly. Our mages are fighting them to a standstill, but they have warriors aboard their ships. Once the magic begins to run dry on both sides, they will proceed to the docks mostly unimpeded. As we lack a naval force, we can't remain at a standstill. Something needs to tip the scales. Bracco bowed in acquiescence. Understood, young lady. He rushed off to do as she asked. Nicoletta stepped forward, her feet meeting the wooden docks. Mina, she motioned. Get that spell ready. Mina nodded quickly and walked to Nicoletta, giving her a thumbs up as a spell matrix hovered in the air. Nicoletta inhaled, and then shouted out. Mages of Mateth. I, Nicoletta of Montesi, will be assuming command in place of my father. Focus only on defending. Use wind spells to disrupt their arrows and ice spells. Because Mina was casting the spell, Nicoletta heard her own voice echo out across the docks. There was a great stir of movement on the docks as people acknowledged and conveyed her orders further. Though most narrowly stuck to the idea of using magic solely for combat, large-scale and simultaneous usage of magic had another effect that her father emphasized. It could affect the environment. Earth magic was the most prominent example of this. One could morph the earth to their whims, forming cover and the like. Nicoletta wished to target the snow elves' largest disadvantage on this field, their ships. The next volley of spells came, and from Mateth, a great tempest rushed forth as the combined efforts of many mages created a fell wind. Though much of the airborne ice soaring through the air diminished the wind before it could reach the longship's sails, it did stir the water, sending a great wave away from the shore. Several of the flying projectiles lost much of their accuracy, and the brutality of the attack was reduced greatly. Nicoletta shouted out once more, keep doing as I said. The time between assaults was longer this time as the longships brought their boats under control. Some even fell overboard from the wild waves jamming against their ships, and that bolstered Nicoletta's confidence. The longships lowered their sails, and many of the oarsmen dedicated time to scooping buckets of water from the ships and depositing them back into the ocean. Once things had calmed, a vague moment of quiet set over the two sides, each waiting with dread. Nicoletta noticed a man climb up one of the masts on the longships. He held his hand out, and a spell matrix formed. She saw the air around stir with red, as though a crack had formed in the air. Nicoletta's eyes widened. The phenomenon known as mana ripples form before the onslaught of an A-rank or higher spell. Different pulsations appear for different types of magic, Nicoletta's brain echoed, recalling a lecture in the distant past. They were probing us, Nicoletta realized. Once their initial push failed, they were probing to be sure no one was present that could counter high-ranking magic. Everyone, prepare your strongest defenses, she shouted in panic, voice shrill. The red pulses started to grow larger, and then the man's hand blinked once. Fire conjured from air swirled together to form a great ball the size of an elephant, and a deafening boom echoed out as it shot forward. It twisted, scattering flames everywhere. The water beneath it turned to steam as it proceeded. Mina grabbed Nicoletta's waist and pulled her away in a desperate panic. The effort brought them both to the ground. The titanic fireball tore through the wooden docks like butter. It collided with a stone, erupting into a great tornado of fire. Wood splinters, scalding water, and fragments of stone exploded everywhere, and fire rushed over Mina's back. Nicoletta held her hand up and cast a D-rank ward. Mina rolled off from atop Nicoletta and cast her own ward, reinforcing what was there. Both of their wards shattered, and Nicoletta recoiled from the impact. She leaned up and shielded Mina with her body, as she knew her enchanted armor would better protect against the flames. She felt the intense heat roiling over her back and setting her hair aflame. Slowly, though, droplets of water started to fall. She stared down at Mina's face, breathing heavily as the fire faded. Once the heat had vanished, she dropped to her back, extinguishing the fire on her hair. Her back stung with unimaginable pain, and the leather armor felt fused with her skin. Nicoletta lifted her head, grunting in pain as she tried to adjust her armor and heal herself. The docks of Mtlnation were gone. The wooden constructions had been completely destroyed. Much of the stone foundation was crumbled and falling into the sea. An enormous amount of water had been sent elsewhere, and a flood rushed forth to replace that which had been displaced. The longships rowed away, resisting the pull until the water was level enough for them to proceed. The dead and dying were everywhere. Nicoletta came to her feet unsteadily, her healing magic working to heal the burnt skin on her back. Grayness consumed the edges of her vision, and she struggled to stay conscious. She looked for people to help or to command, but everyone was scattered. The only few that survived hid behind B-rank wards. Other survivors sheltered alongside them. Then, from far above, a roar echoed out across the city. Nicoletta turned her head to its source, the sky. Above, she briefly witnessed a flash of grey cover the sunlight. She followed it with her eyes, and then she placed it. It was a grey wyvern. Something fell from atop it, dropping through the air. She witnessed another minor ripple in the air, a teal one. This time it grew larger, shaking the sky, until it turned the azure sky teal. Nicoletta lost herself to despair, unable to process what was happening. An avatar appeared in the air. It resembled the upper half of an armored knight, but it was formed of quickly moving wind. The avatar raised its fist in the air. Nicoletta's breathing quickened, and the contents of her stomach pushed against her throat. She was crying. She realized. The fist came down. It did not aim for Mtlnation. A golden ward appeared before the fist, but it shattered like a thin layer of glass. The avatar of wind struck the water around the longships. The water sunk and then exploded upwards, tossing the closest longships into the air as though they weighed nothing. The water surged outwards, battering the already damaged docks and casting a shadow of falling droplets over Mtlnation. The few ships that were not launched airborne were overturned by the fierce waves, their armored warriors sinking into the depths from the weight of their armor. Nicoletta watched this scene, shaking as water fell on her as though it was raining. One of the longships landed on the walls of Mtlnation, splitting in half and sending the warriors aboard to their deaths from the height. S-rank magic, she murmured, shaking. She felt a pair of arms around her, and realized Mina was holding her and pulling her away. The figure above descended to the ground, his hands alive with a spell matrix as he slowed his quick descent. A short old man wearing a decadent grey robe landed, surveying what was once the docks of Mtlnation. Tower Master Castro remained vigilant. Above, the grey wyvern circled like a seagull waiting to feast. Chapter 39, Darker Skies. Argrave stared up at a sheer wall of ice, the two suns above raining light down. The light traveled through the wall, illuminating it and sending rainbow-colored rays in odd directions. Though the light made it seem magical, Argrave was searching for enchantments without success. It was a wonder such a thing could persist throughout the ages without help from magic. 100-foot-tall wall made of ice could not be a simple endeavor. He reached a hand out and touched the blue ice. Even through his gloves, he could feel the cold. It emanated outwards, and he pulled away his fingers as though he just touched dry ice. Even with the sunlight above, it did not melt, it did not morph, and it did not fall, protecting against the snow for thousands of years. Perhaps there was some irony in that. The greatest bulwark against the cold was cold. Argrave heard footsteps behind, and he turned to spot Annalise. The capital of Vaiden lay before him, unlike the previous city of Katla. The eponymously named capital Vaiden was made of stone. It was ancient, too. The buildings were carved, each one depicting some sort of historical scene. It looked more a ruin than a city, yet snow elves abounded nonetheless, joyfully participating in the suffering of the world. "I've found their home," Annalise began, walking to him. "Glimmer's family lives not so far from here, according to the locals." "Do you truly intend to visit them?" "I do," Argrave nodded, tapping his cane against the ground. He gestured for Annalise to lead onwards, and they moved through the city slowly. "I didn't expect this place to be so developed," Argrave commented. "I hear the word tribe, the mind thinks of backwards people. But this place is truly just a civilization separate from Berenda. I suppose a people capable of sailing and using steel have no reason to be simple." He gazed at some of the stone carvings as he passed. The city of Vaiden was carved from a glacier formed atop a mountain. Annalise spoke quickly. "Thousands of years of history have been etched into the stone here. Even then, we Vaidaman were using steel. We have never been a technologically stunted people. We have only been divided and lacking resources. Now, that has changed." Argrave turned his head to Annalise. He was very curious about her motivations, her goals, her likes, her dislikes. She liked to stay neutral and passive in conversation, but she seemed to genuinely care about Vaiden. They shared a common interest, a fascination with the world of heroes of Berenda. Hers was more scholarly, granted. "I suppose I have plenty of time to learn about her," Argrave thought. "Here," Annalise pointed, stopping them both. "That building." Argrave turned towards where she was pointing. It seemed a fairly nice home, large enough for a family to live. Certainly. It was square and stone like most other buildings in this city, so it was difficult to judge if it was exactly well off. Argrave stepped forward towards the stone door at the entrance, lifting his cane and tapping it thrice. After a few moments, he heard faint footsteps on the other side of the door. A woman's voice called out, "Who is it?" "Hi. Is this the residence of Glimmer's wife?" Argrave called out. After a few moments, The door peeked open. A deep purple eye sized him up. "You aren't a Vadaman." "I'm a friend of your husband's." Argrave tapped his chest. "I wanted to meet his family, see how you're holding up." She opened the door wide, some amount of confusion and shock on her face. She looked rather young, and her face had a kind innocence to it, as though retaining all its childlike naivete. Her hair was a bright gold color and kept short. "You mean on the human continent?" "You spoke to him?" "He's my retainer, though he's presently not here for reasons I'm sure you can surmise." Argrave nodded. "May we come in?" Her eyes darted round, her mouth agape in surprise. "I never thought." "Guilliman, how is he? Did he look well? How has he been doing?" The questions poured out as her wariness immediately faded. "Oh, forgive me." "Come in." "My name is Miriam. My son is downstairs. I should." Her voice faded away as she ran into the house. Argrave looked at Annalise while laughing lightly through his nose, and then he entered, cane clicking against the stone. He tried to shut the door casually, but he found it unmoving. He had to push it shut with his whole body. Miriam walked back into the room from the basement. Behind her, Argrave saw a familiar-looking face. He was rather taken aback by how similar the snow elf looked to his father, Guilliman. Argrave reckoned if the boy were to get some age lines, some scars, and possible post-traumatic stress disorder from years of intense war, he'd be Guilliman's double. "Have a seat," Miriam beckoned. "Please." "I'll prepare drinks." Hash. Nicoletta pulled Mina's arms off her, and said, "Come on," pulling her friend along with her as they rushed to the side of the bald old man that had just devastated the enemy mages. He was barely taller than Mina, but considering what he'd just done, Nicoletta approached with cautious deference. "Thank you for the assistance, but who are you, sir?" "The Tower Master," the short old man replied. "You are the young Lady Montesi. I'd advise you to be careful. Their warriors fell into the ocean, but many of those mages will surely not fall so easily." "Master Castro?" Nicoletta said aloud. "Thank the gods you came." She brought a still trembling hand to her mouth. "Thank the gods." She knelt down, feeling queasy. "As I said, young lady, the battle is not over," he advised kindly. "That one spell has expended my magic greatly. Now, we still have to deal with the rest. I have innumerable questions, but I will not head to you just yet." "Right," she said, nodding as she looked at the ground. "Right. I'm the ducal heir of House Montesi. I can't be stopped by just this." She stood. "There are invaders outside the walls, attacking the garrison with throwing weapons." "Should I?" A crack echoed through the air, and in the time it took Nicoletta to blink, she saw a jagged cut of lightning through the air. It struck her armor and the enchantments shone brightly, allowing only some lightning through. That they persisted despite how much damage Nicoletta had taken was a testament to the armor's craftsmanship. The Tower Master pointed his hand, and a thin needle of fire shot out of a quickly formed spell matrix followed by a scream of agony. "Nikki," Mina spoke, her voice shaky. "We should get to safety. The forces are broken, and will just be baggage to the Tower Master. I can't just abandon things, run away. I have a duty as the ducal heir." She shouted at Mina. "What good can we do here?" Mina urged. I don't." "Damn it." Nicoletta's voice cracked. "She is somewhat right. Here, only the Titans walk still. You may be of some minor help, but I would feel more comfortable if the death of Duke Enrico's daughter was not a potential outcome of every spell tossed my way." The Tower Master did not take his eyes from the scene before him. Nicoletta took deep breaths, considering things. Eventually, she nodded. Her eyes drifted to the building close to what remained of the docks. "But my father is in the customs office. I cannot leave him there. I felt a B-rank mage near him, and I am not incautious. He should be fine." "Now go, young lady," Castro commanded. "Come on, Nikki." Mina tugged at her arm. "Fine," Nicoletta conceded, nodding. "But not to safety. Back to the wall. Those elves outside will need to be dealt with." The Tower Master reached into his robes and pulled free a decadent black whistle. "If you're so committed to that idea, take this. With it, you can call my wyvern." Blow it twice and point at the invaders. "My grey owl is smart. He will know from that alone." He thrust the gilded whistle towards Nicoletta, and she caught it. She examined the whistle in her hand, and then clenched it tight. "Thank you, Master Castro. House Montesi owes you the greatest debt imaginable." "Mina, let's go." Mina hesitantly nodded, and then the two ran away from the docks, weaving into the city. Some of the people that had previously locked themselves in their homes were emerging, moving about in panic from the tremendous impacts. Most ran away from the docks. Mina and Nicoletta had great difficulty moving unimpeded. As they ran, the archers that Nicoletta had called for pushed their way past. Nicoletta opened her mouth to call out to them, but then decided they would still be best suited near the docks than at the walls. The wyvern would be a game-changer. She clenched it tighter in hand, her other hand holding Mina by the arm so they were not separated. Soon enough, they broke free from the crowds and made their way to the walls once more. Nicoletta ran up the stairs, winded but persistent in her path to the top. When she made it to the top, she paused to catch for breath while surveying the scene. There were a lot more dead now than when she left, axes, javelins, and arrows sticking out from their cold corpses. The red-haired mercenary, Melanie, turned her head back to look at Nicoletta. She'd taken up a bow, her sword resting at her feet. "The Papegi returns," Melanie shouted, Releasing the bowstring, she ducked behind one of the parapets. "Watch your words," Mina bristled, but Nicoletta stopped her. "Mina," she huffed, far too out of breath for a long reprimand. Later, she stepped forward, minding that she did not reveal her head above the parapets. "What's happened?" "I'd like to ask you that," Melanie countered. "Explosions, giants, a damn boat landing on the wall. We had to deal with some mage who landed up here." "Well, I did," Melanie amended. "Mages always have terrible reaction time. The docks are ruined. I think things are under control, but..." Nicoletta shook her head. "I think now is the time to wrap things up here." "Huh?" Melanie made an incredulous noise. "The pretty young lady's got a trick up her sleeve." "Does she?" Mina kicked her shin, but it hit Melanie's plate boot. The mercenary shot a cocky grin in return. Nicoletta ignored the mercenary's conduct, looking up to the sky at the grey wyvern. She took the whistle in her hand, holding it tightly. She could feel the sweat beneath her leather gauntlets. Nicoletta watched the line of invaders arrayed outside, thinking things through in her head. "Protect me for a little bit," she directed, rising to her feet. She brought the whistle to her lips and blew it twice. The sound was rather ordinary, and at once, it was superseded by a great roar from the sky. Nicoletta kept her eyes fixed on the mages grouped together near the center and pointed her finger right at them. Nicoletta did not tear her gaze from the invaders. They stayed huddled near each other at a fair distance, waiting for their opportunity to move in. Then, like a ripple passed through them, their heads turned to the left. Their unity started to shatter as many moved away, shouting. Then, they all ran in panic. A grey blur passed by, sliding against the ground and leaving a great cloud of grass, wheat, and dirt in its wake. It cruised by countless of the snow elves, crushing and ripping them apart with ease. When its momentum finally slowed, it took off running and jumped to the skies, great wings bringing it ever upwards. "Hot damn," Melanie said, watching the scene. She stood up, knocking another arrow. "No time like the present, boys," she shouted, rallying the troops. "Let those marble bastards know what you've been through." She pulled back the arrow and fired. Nicoletta watched the wyvern until it was far, far in the air, and then blew the whistle twice again, her finger pointing near the bulk of them. The wyvern brought its wings together till it resembled a dart in the sky and dropped towards the earth with terrifying speed. Once more, it crashed into the earth, sliding and tearing. It caught a mage in its jaws. But the snow elves did not remain idle. A few stepped forward, grabbing the wyvern's wings to hold it down. One of the mages shot up into the sky and fired a spear of ice, impaling the creature's wings. With all the efficiency of a butcher, their warriors climbed atop the reptile's wings and cut its webbings. The beast roared out in pain, tearing its wing free from the ice spike. It thrashed about, trying to keep the tide of slowly approaching warriors at bay. "Keep firing," Melanie shouted once more. Arrows soared at the Vadaimon in droves, piercing their backs as they dealt with the wyvern. The elves encircled the wyvern, holding javelins in front of them. Even when the beast swung its wings to batter its foes, their spears would stab the creature. The snow elves leapt in with all the ruthlessness of a wolf pack, slowly wearing away at the creature with a mechanical efficiency. Mages attacked from the back, opening great wounds with potent ice magic. It seemed a practiced tactic. Another volley of arrows thinned the snow elves' numbers considerably. The wyvern broke free from the encirclement, killing many. It tried to break into the run and fly, but it only jumped and crashed miserably. More of the Vadaimon came to finish it off, and it swatted them away with its tail, roaring. Finally, an ice spike hurtled through the air, catching the creature in the eye. The creature reared back and then fell to the fields outside Madoth, lifeless. Nicoletta felt a great deal of despair for the wyvern's death, but beneath it was a fierce relief as she felt the snow elves' numbers had thinned enough that they were no longer an issue. One of the snow elves pulled free a horn, blowing into it thrice. It was returned at another portion of the wall. Nicoletta watched cautiously, expecting the worst. When the Vadaimon started moving away, she could not process what was happening immediately. It was not until a lone soldier shouted out, "Victory!" that Nicoletta began to consider the possibility. She stepped to the parapets, watching them leave. She felt a great rush in her chest as some new emotion found its way into her heart. She clenched the black whistle in her hand, raised a fist to the sky, and joined with the shouts of victory. Much had been lost. All of Madoth's fleet was lost at the sea. The bulk of their military force was dead, the majority of them having been well-trained knights. The docks had been completely destroyed and rebuilding them would cost a fortune in gold, a commodity which would be very precious in the wake of the civil war. They owed a huge debt to Master Castro, both in his assistants and his wyvern. Their losses were not small, but above all that, one simple truth prevailed. Madoth had not fallen. Chapter 40, The Marketplace of Ideas. Argrave took a drink of what Muriam had provided him. It was a warm drink, but it was quite bitter and potent. It left a pleasant aftertaste, though, and Argrave quickly enough took a second drink and placed the stone cup gingerly back on the table. Annalise sat beside him, listening to their conversation in silence. "It sounds like Gilliman has a big task ahead of him," Muriam said, staring at the table with her hands on her lap. "I thought that." "Well, I don't know what I thought. He sends gold to us every so often," Muriam commented, looking at her son who sat quietly beside her. "Even when he isn't here, I can live well and take care of Ramadan. I can take care of myself, Ramadan refuted. Miriam reached forward and pinched his ear. That right? Door is over there, young man. Ow. Ramadan freed himself and swatted at her hand. Argrave maintained a polite, businesslike smile. Glimmer's as quiet and grim as ever. Still, he's one of the best at what he does. One day, he'll be sitting beside me as we talk. You can hold me to that. Miriam stared at him. Eventually, she nodded. We write to each other, at times, but tell him that I love him, and that I just want him to be happy. She poked Ramadan. What do you want to tell your father? I don't know, said Ramadan with an indifferent shrug. He had all the bearing of a moody teenager, Argrave thought. Argrave leaned to the table, setting his elbows down and staring intently. If you don't mind me asking, how exactly did Gilliman become a vampire? Miriam's deep purple eyes shook, and she stiffened in the chair. He never told you? He's not much for conversation, as you know, Argrave said with a light smile. I only know it all because I found out another way. I was not there, Miriam said after a long pause. You would be better off asking someone who was. Maybe, Argrave conceded with a nod. But I don't know who was, and their stories would probably have an impersonal effect anyway. Gilliman's wife pursed her lips, considering whether or not to speak. Eventually, she opened her mouth. His brother was the one who turned him into a vampire. After Gilliman killed him, he was exiled for both kinslaying and vampirism. If you ask everyone around the city, they'll say it happened because Baron was jealous of Gilliman and sought to disgrace him. But, Argrave pressed. Baron and Gilliman were always on good terms, Miriam said quickly, some emotion brewing in her tone. Baron turned Gilliman, that much is beyond doubt. I don't have any evidence for this, but I simply can't believe Baron would act without another behind him, pressing him onwards. I'll say no more. If you want brutal details, you would be best asking another. I do not enjoy reliving the worst day of my life. She lowered her head, refusing to meet Argrave's gaze. Ramadan leaned forward and rubbed his mother's back, consoling her in the quiet. Argrave stood, taking another drink of the brew. Well, although this has been an enjoyable visit, I think I should leave now. I have things to attend to, and I would not want to overstay my welcome. Miriam, thank you for your hospitality. Argrave bowed cordially, and retrieved his cane. Oh, well. She looked briefly overwhelmed, and then said, thank you for coming to me with this. Tell Gilliman that I love him, and that Ramadan is becoming a fine young man. After nodding, Argrave tapped Annalise's shoulder, and she stood. Both of them walked outside. Argrave sneezed as the cold outside wind hit him, and he brought the fur cloak over his shoulders a little tighter. That was weird, Argrave said, shuddering as his body got used to the cold once more. You were expecting something different? No, that was about what I expected. Just the first time I sat down and talked about pointless stuff in a while. No purpose, just an hour or so of relaxation. Hard to relax when I have so much on my mind, but I tried to relax, at least. Argrave sneezed once more. God damn it, he complained with a clogged nose. I think I've got another cold. He reached into his pockets, feeling the bronze hand mirror but little else. I lost my hanky. Great. Maybe we should head inside for the day, Annalise offered. Forget that, I've got stuff to do. Far as I'm concerned, I'm behind schedule. Argrave waved his hands dismissively and then stretched. Let's go to that library. Rose hopefully there, can teach me how to hug trees and such. Maybe I can con one of the big shot mages into curing me. Annalise shook her head with a quiet laugh from her nose and walked onwards, leading Argrave to where he asked to go. Rose stared up at Argrave with a great measure of caution in his beady grey eyes. The nasty scowl was gone, though, and Argrave would much prefer caution over dismissal. They stood in a grandiose library of stone. Statues and bookshelves were the room's sole decorations. A great many people wondered about the library. Argrave presumed they were all spellcasters, for all he recognized were indeed so. And who let you in here? Rowe questioned, his tone low. Argrave pointed to Annalise behind him. The Patriarch told me I had free reign of his patriarchate. I thought I might take a look at some of the books. The old mage harumphed, saggy skin shaking. If that's the way it is, so be it. He turned to walk, but Argrave spoke again before he got too far. I wanted to ask you if I could take some spellbooks from here. Druidic magic spellbooks. I need a way to. Well, I don't need to say what I need it for. You want to take books? Rowe repeated. That patron of yours didn't teach you spells? I know the Abyssal Hand Earl of Nihr has knowledge of our magic. I've seen those twisted abominations he calls his emissaries use them. Rich parents can only give their kids so much before they become spoiled. Argrave walked a little closer, cane tapping against the cold stone floor. He decided I still have to work hard, tragic as that may be. No cranial brain beams of esoteric magics. So can I take them? Rose's bushy brows lowered. A ridiculous request. This library took near a millennium to establish. Have you even the slightest notion how difficult paper is to get in this snowscape? Our knowledge is the fruit of our efforts and a testament to our faith. Come on, don't make me beg, please. Argrave tapped his cane against the ground. Rose spat, a scowl taking its place on his face. "Impertinent boy, stop wasting my time. I've already got egg on my face from you airing my secret about Crystal Wind. I don't need to suffer yet more of your pestering." Then instead of helping the person trying to stop the world from ending, Argrave said drolly, stepping forward, "How about we trade knowledge for knowledge, human magic for elven magic?" He saw her grind his teeth. "That sarcasm of yours, infuriating, as ever." Ro scratched the top of his bald head. "If it's a trade, I'll agree, if only because both our forces need to be strengthened." "What do you offer, then?" "I'll teach you how to inscribe, specifically, how to translate low-ranking spells into inscriptions, so that you can create the simpler enchanted items." Knowing how to translate means this vast library can be put to good use. Argrave waved his hand around the room. If it's that." Ro rubbed his chin. "If it's that much, I can give you a lot in return." "What is it you want?" "Full access, obviously." Argrave spread his hand out as though it was the natural course of things. "Full access?" Ro repeated. "You want me to let you walk around and take whichever book you please? Oh, and I suppose you'll want them to be nicely wrapped in gold thread and delivered right to your home. If you can. Oh, and perfume the books." Argrave nodded, cheerily sarcastic. "Really, what's wrong with that? Did I forget to mention the part where Gerectic Kid is coming?" "I'm too old and bitter to be milked dry," Ro retorted. "I made sure that the Vadiamon would help you, but I did not surrender all of our earthly possessions to your cause. We still have need of them." Argrave sighed. "Fine, I'll tell you what. I know you have some vessels that smuggle things to and from Berenda. If you send one of those to Just, have them wait for me. I can bring a shipment of illusion spellbooks. That's a whole new school of magic for your people. I should trust you, the glorified lackey of Erlebne, the big mouth. I'm likely to be left pissing in a snowstorm." Argrave laughed. "Not sure what that means, but I get what you're saying. Listen, we can draft a damned contract if you're so timid. Annalise and Gilliman will keep me to my word if I do that." "Right. That one." Good head on his shoulders, that Gilliman. Ro nodded. "Well, damn it, I always come away talking with you feeling like I've just eaten dirt. I don't like it. But fine, I'll let you take what books you please, if only for a greater cause." "Yeah, right. I'm the one getting shorted here." "Don't act like you're some saint," Argrave shot back. Ro shook his head, walking away muttering things like "impertinent boy," or "lackwit binpole." Argrave turned back to Annalise, prepared to start perusing the wonderful new library, but her gaze was focused on another person. It was a woman. She and Annalise were of the same height, and indeed looked quite similar in appearance. The other woman was much older. If she was allowed in the library, she must have been a mage. "Grandmother," Annalise greeted. "Found another coattail to latch onto?" Annalise crossed her arms and looked away. Argrave frowned and took a step closer, hesitant to say anything. "You certainly know how to rise up in the ranks. You play the innocent quiet girl well enough, but you took advantage of me to become a spellcaster. You took advantage of Patriarch Idris to earn prestige amongst the Vadiamon, and now you're to take advantage of the mortal agent of Erlebne." "That's not," Annalise started. "Don't forget everything I did for you, Annalise. I put you in action. Everything you've got, you owe to me." She stepped forward, prodding Annalise's collarbone. "Lady," interrupted Argrave, stepping forward between them. "Why don't you go sit on a broomstick or something? This is a library." "Quiet tones," he urged, putting a finger to his lips. Many people watched their confrontation. "I'm saying this for your sake," Annalise's grandmother said to Argrave. "Don't trust this one with too much. She'll wring you dry, and when she's done, she'll find another that can give her more." "Is that right?" Argrave asked. "No wonder, Argrave," Annalise said sharply. "Let me speak." Argrave looked back and then stepped aside, one hand in the air in a gesture of surrender. "Everything you did for me?" Annalise repeated. "Your only help was poaching me from the other spellcasters, teaching me when you saw I had a talent in the area. You never helped my mother and I when we returned to Vaiden, not once. You accuse me of being manipulative, overambitious. You fail to realize that when you place glass before something black and heartless like yourself, it becomes a mirror." Annalise finished. She turned towards Argrave, brushing past him and moving into the library. "She speaks well, doesn't she?" her grandmother said, grinning. "Don't be charmed by her pretty face. She herself just said she was black and heartless." Argrave spared one last glance at her grandmother before turning and following after Annalise. Once they were relatively secluded, she stopped and turned, staring at Argrave. Argrave waited for her to speak, but she said nothing. Argrave frowned. "What? I do something wrong? You have no questions for me?" Argrave considered this for a long while, but nothing came to mind. "I don't know." "What do you want me to ask?" "Was she always that nasty?" Annalise was visibly taken aback. "My grandmother says something like that, and you have no questions? You take me on your journey so easily, without doubt, without fear." "Sounds like you want me to distrust you," Argrave answered back. "Not sure what you might wring me dry of by coming with me." "My knowledge, my life." "The second might worry me if I didn't trust you. But the first is exactly what I intend to impart to you." Argrave scratched his chin, stepping around Annalise and asking ponderingly, "Unless, are you an agent of Gerectic Kid?" Hargrave shook his head. Not likely. He's not so good at making friends or even subordinates. I've made my decision after proper consideration. Some old hag isn't going to change that. If she was taken aback earlier, she was shaken now. Hargrave presumed it was because her conversation with her grandmother had rattled her more than she cared to show. Stop worrying. Let me go teach Ro how to enchant stuff. He touched her shoulder and then walked further into the library of stone. If you like this audiobook, subscribe the channel for more videos like this. And join my Patreon if you want to support me, where you can find the complete collection Jackal Among Snakes audiobooks. Hurry up, what are you waiting for? Leave some comment and let me know if you guys like this story, or you have a web novel you like and want to hear its audiobook. I will be happy to create them for you. Please like, share, and leave a comment on the video.